Chapter 1021. 5 heads and a promotion of 1 rank. First of all, it was hard to say whether they could win against the entire army of the Frost Mirror grassland. Even if they could survive until the change in the Hungduan Mountains and the Northern Frontier Army came to their aid, how many of them could survive? And of those who survived, how many of them could successfully chop off 5 or more heads? Of course, he would do as he said. However, he knew very well that this was nothing more than a way to boost the morale of his army. On the battlefield, life and death could be decided in an instant. How could he have so many chances to chop off the heads of his enemies and carry them with him? However, this idea was too powerful. If one were to expand it further, it would be the military merit system that the Great Qin Empire relied on to conquer the 6 states. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, the reform of the state of Wei was the earliest. As the saying went, one must work hard in order to earn merit. It completely changed the practice of the Zhou imperial family selecting people from relatives and old friends to obtain official positions or military ranks. After that, it was the reform of the state of Wu, who was killed by the nobles of the state of Chu. The reform of the state of Chu led to the reform of the state of Chu. Using the reduced ranks of nobles, the state of Chu used the reduced ranks of nobles to strengthen the state of Chu. These 2 states were undoubtedly the strongest in the Warring States period. After that, it was the military merit system that Xiangyang proposed after the reform of the state of Qin. In Xiangyang's reform, anyone who made military contributions could enjoy a noble title regardless of their family background, social class, or social class. In an instant, it created a valiant Qin empire where every citizen was a soldier and was willing to fight. Following that, Xiangyang proposed that those from the imperial family who did not make military contributions could not be a subordinate, which removed the privilege of the imperial family and the nobles who obtained a high rank based on their bloodline. That was how the Great Qin came to have the Meng clan, Wang clan, and other clans that produced many famous generals. Even the Ying clan had many generals who were good at war. Unfortunately, even if Lin Yuan knew about this, he would not adopt the military merit system as the standard for the Northern Frontier Army. This was because not only had the system allowed Great Qin to sweep through the 6 nations, but it had also nearly destroyed Great Qin. For example, the famous general Li Xian of the Qin dynasty at the end of the Warring States period. If one carefully studied his military exploits, one could see that when Li Xian was at his peak, he was a famous general who could be mentioned in the same breath as Meng Tian in the Qin dynasty. He was also a typical example of successful military exploits under the system of military exploits. His war record was extremely dazzling. He had participated in a series of battles such as attacking Zhao, exterminating Yan, exterminating Chu, and exterminating Qi. However, it was as if a man like him had been forgotten by the historians. Only in the historical records related to Li Xian could one see the figure of Li Xian. Nevertheless, it was not difficult to tell that Li Xian was a general highly valued and trusted by Ying Zheng, and that emperor, who was a man of great talent and bold vision, had given Li Xian sufficient authority and a stage for him to display his talents. However, Li Xian was a man who liked to use his troops in dangerous situations, and he was also very greedy for military exploits under the system of military exploits. The reason why he was not recorded in the history books was because he was one of the few real stains in Ying Zheng's life. According to the history books, when Qin dynasty attacked Chu dynasty, Ying Zheng asked Wang Jian how many soldiers and horses he needed. Wang Jian said 600,000, but Li Xian said 200,000 would be enough. Ying Zheng was overjoyed and said, "General Wang is already old, why are you afraid? General Li is indeed a man of great courage. What you said is true." This was a scene that was recorded in the historical records. After that, during the war against Chu dynasty, Li Xian vividly taught Ying Zheng a lesson called Your Father or Your Father. And the lesson was very expensive. The 200,000 Qin soldiers that Ying Zheng assigned to Li Xian to attack Chu dynasty were defeated by Xiang Yan, and almost all of them were wiped out. After that, Li Xian never appeared on the stage of history again. Of course, there were some historical records that stated that Li Xian did not die in this battle. However, in all the later battles, Li Xian basically played a supporting role, and did all the work for Li Xian. In the history books, Li Xian was also erased, and even the cause of his death was not explained. Ironically, when the 200,000 Qin soldiers were completely wiped out and the Great Qin Empire was facing a crisis, the historical records once again recorded that Ying Zheng invited Wang Jian out and said with an extremely angry tone, "I did not use the general strategy. Li Xian is indeed a disgrace to the Qin army." Li Xian was defeated by his own arrogance, and Ying Zheng was defeated by his own credulity. However, there was no doubt that Li Xian's defeat was due to the military merit system. Under such a system, a general like Li Xian would be born. If he wanted to win, he would win, but if he wanted to lose, he would lose. There was no possibility of being in the middle. Although Lin Yuan was invincible, that was only for himself. In the future, the northern frontier would become bigger and bigger, and the Xinwu dynasty or the Tianwu continent would not be the end of his conquest. In the not-too-distant future, he would even be like the great desolate world, conquering thousands of worlds, and constantly absorbing nutrients for himself to grow. In the end, he would lead an army into the great desolate world, and work together with the other system hosts to fight against Hong Jun and his subordinates. If the northern frontier was defeated, with Lin Yuan, the northern frontier could still continue to exist. However, in the future, when the Tianwu world was defeated in the Great Desolate World, could Lin Yuan protect the entire world? This kind of defeat that could easily cause the entire army to be wiped out was not something he could accept. Seeing the excitement on the faces of the surrounding soldiers, as if they could not wait to rush out of the Great Wall and kill a few Shuangjian barbarian, the bald man sighed in his heart. He was afraid that he had used too much strength this time. After thinking for a while, his eyes narrowed and he added, "However, brothers, there will be opportunities for promotion and wealth in the future. The most important thing is to survive. Although my attitude is clear, I still have to give the higher-ups a way out. Therefore, in addition to the reward, I have to set another rule for you. From now on, 5 people will work together in a team. If one of you dies, the other 4 will be punished, and you will have to kill the enemy to atone for your crimes. If one of you dies, you will have to kill 1 more enemy, and if 2 of you die, you will have to kill 2 more enemy. The number of heads you cut off will be subtracted from the number of your comrades who died in battle. Only then will the higher-ups recognize the reward I set for you. Do you understand?" It was impossible to win a battle with hot-bloodedness and valiance. Even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. However, with the reward in front of the rules, these little bastards would not risk their lives to harvest the heads of the Shuangjian barbarian. Instead, they would really work together in battle. Not only would the battle formation increase their chances of victory, it would also reduce the casualties. The possibility of them dragging on until the Hengduan mountain range changed would also be greater. The surrounding soldiers were silent for a moment before they agreed once again. The rules were set not only to give the higher-ups a way out, but also to protect themselves. This was to prevent some people who were hot-blooded and left the battle formation for promotion and wealth, which would only drag them down. Furthermore, as long as the reward did not change, they would have enough motivation. Naturally, there was no possibility of their enthusiasm decreasing. They would just be more cautious. Chapter 1022. Northern Frontier. Shanning City. Lin Yuan saw more and more northern frontier troops gathering outside the city through the eyes of God. He turned his head to look at Li Zhongxing, who had a calm expression on his face. After the two looked at each other for a moment, Lin Yuan twitched the corner of his mouth and asked doubtfully, "You've mobilized almost the entire Great Wall garrison. Are you sure the remaining guys can withstand the cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty?" Li Zhongxing was silent for a moment and then turned his head to the side. He lowered his voice and said, "When this general conquered the north, he encountered a powerful fellow in the first battle. With less than 100,000 soldiers, he was able to hold off the main force of the Southern Expedition Army for almost an entire day. Although the result was indeed this general's victory, in terms of the process, this general lost completely." After a pause, he continued, "Among the 100,000 troops, except for less than 10,000 of the original garrison troops, the rest were servants, guards, and even newly recruited able-bodied men. They had received almost no military training, and their equipment was also very simple. Some of them even used pitchforks and kitchen knives to fight against my army. In addition, he lost to me not because he could only hold on for a day, but because my army was far more numerous than his at that time. Under the siege, he would lose sooner or later. In order to avoid a disaster of cannibalism, he compromised and surrendered. Otherwise, I would have wasted a lot of time when I went out to sweep the north." Hearing Lin Yuan's words, Lin Yuan twitched the corner of his mouth and tried hard not to laugh out loud. He did not deny Xin Linjun's strength, but he would not blindly praise Xin Linjun either. This was because Li Zhongxing, who was trained as a future officer in Xin Linjun's reserve force, was not even as good as Luo Su, the former commander of the garrison corps in Zhongshan City. He even learned from Luo Su for a period of time before he became the commander-in-chief of the southern expedition in the northern frontier. Shen Linjun was indeed strong, but this kind of strength also led to many mistakes. For example, when Shen Linjun fought, he only needed to rely on his strong individual strength and superior equipment and supplies that were far superior to others to flatten the enemy. He did not need good command and tactics at all. The so-called Shen Linjun's reserve officers learned how to observe their own team and not affect their fellow soldiers in battle. However, Li Zhongxing had indeed grown a lot after experiencing the war with the Frost Mirror Barbarian and the Sky Demon Corps. This also showed that Shen Linjun trained him as an officer because he had the qualifications and not because Shen Linjun's higher-ups casually chose him. Some things were better left unsaid. There was no need to say it out loud. However, Li Zhongxing's words had indeed aroused Lin Yuan's interest. Relying on less than 10,000 city guards and a large number of militia to make Li Zhongxing suffer in a situation where their military strength and equipment were inferior, this leader was indeed a talented general. It was even possible that he was an existence that had truly experienced war. The defense of the Great Wall of the northern frontier has been handed over to this person by this subordinate. We have also made a deduction. The Frost Mirror Barbarian's ability to play a limited role in a siege battle is extremely limited. In addition, the area of the pass that can be used for battle is not large. In a situation where he does not come out, he can at least hold on for 2 months. Even if the situation changes, in the worst-case scenario, he can hold on for half a month. This is enough to hold on until the Black Water Army cleans up the northern frontier's undead and then go to their rescue. It's just that. Li Zhongxing still tilted his head, as if he did not want Lin Yuan to see the embarrassment on his face. After a while he muttered, "This guy likes to make empty promises. After this battle, I'm afraid that this general will have to bleed a little. There is no problem on my side, but I'm afraid that the king of the northern frontier will have some bad ideas. Therefore, I hope that the Dragon King will take care of me." Lin Yuan nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Of course. If this person can block the Shuangjian dynasty's army for this king, it will be a meritorious service to destroy the country. This king will naturally not be stingy." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Yuan's gaze shifted, and he said in a deep voice, "However, the army outside is almost fully assembled. Then, we should also set off for the Hengduan mountain range. Let's go and give this king's old friends a big surprise." The Black Water Army was in charge of cleaning up the immortals in the northern frontier. Those underworld river creatures were also with the Black Water Army. It would take at most half a month to completely clean up the immortals in the northern frontier. In addition, Lin Yuan had now set up teleportation formations in each of the Black Water Army's Dragon King temples in the northern frontier. They did not even need to travel and could directly rush to the battlefield. It could be said that once they were free, they would be able to give the Shuangjian dynasty a fierce blow. In a conventional war, no one could win against Lin Yuan. It was because he was a cheat. The base of more than 400 million Joss flames was placed here. There were also the believers in the northern frontier and the believers of the gray-scaled flood dragon people providing Joss flames every day to support the extremely developed teleportation formations in the northern frontier. It was even more ridiculous than the time when Lin Yuan helped the monster beasts in the outer sea in the Endless Sea. Although Lin Yuan did not have the command this time with the Eye of God, after activating the shared command channel, it was directly connected to the Northern Frontiers Military Institute and the Strategic Analysis Department. Even the slightest abnormality would be known to everyone. Under this situation, the entire Northern Frontier seemed to be a single entity. Behind every single army were countless strategists providing strategies. Even if different armies were very far away from each other, they could still communicate tactics with each other. How could the Flying Dragon Face Rider lose? No, this seemed to be a poisonous milk. Lin Yuan spat twice in his heart. Then, he twisted his body and flew out as if he did not recognize his own family. As for the cultivators of the Shuangjian dynasty, in general, powerful cultivators would not interfere with the secular affairs of the empire. Even the ruler of a country could only reach the Heaven Star border realm at most. How high could the cultivation of the officials and generals under him be? Even if there were 1 or 2 strange creatures, were the cultivators of the northern frontier all dead? The cultivators of the other empires were under the jurisdiction of the guardians of the heavenly gates, but who dared to interfere with the cultivators of the northern frontier? This was not the first time that Lin Yuan had flipped out. The last time, he had called for a creature from the outside world to kill the ancestor demons of the endless sea like they were dogs. This time, Lin Yuan had personally attacked and used a great divine ability that countless natives of the Tianwu world did not even dare to imagine. He had directly killed 2 demon kings and even refined their souls into the black water of the netherworld realm, causing them to never be able to reincarnate. Words like having one's soul destroyed and never being able to reincarnate were considered the highest punishments among the guardians of the heavenly gates. These so-called great cultivators did not have the courage to become enemies with Lin Yuan. After all, if they lost to someone else, they could think of a way to revive. If they really could not, they could reincarnate. However, if they lost to Lin Yuan, it would be fine if there was no enmity between them, but if there was a grudge between them, they would be ordered around even after they died. Chapter 1023. Shunning City was the current capital of the northern frontier. It was also a pass between the northern frontier and the north. In other words, the border cities of the Shenwu dynasty were all passes. Over the years, Lei Qiuxing had been fighting with the demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range for territory. Although from a military point of view, the existence of these passes ensured the safety of the northern frontier cities, from an economic point of view, the reason why the northern frontier was poor was mostly because of these passes. This point could be seen from the fact that ever since Lin Yuan took control of the northern frontier, the profits he obtained were so great that even the guards of the Heavenly Gate formation were envious. The reason why the rich countries that had been fighting all year round were not very rich was because of the lack of manpower. Every time there was a war, except for some so-called dangerous terrain that the militarist had to fight for, the territories that they fought for were basically places with abundant materials. As the saying goes, one relies on the mountain to make use of the mountain, and one relies on the river to make use of the water. If it were not for the demon beasts attacking the northern frontier, which was built close to the Hengduan mountain range, might have been even richer than some of the cities along the southern coast. As the largest source of demon beasts materials and forest spiritual items, the northern frontier should have attracted countless merchant groups. However, looking at the northern frontier before, not a single decent merchant group was willing to establish a foothold here. On the contrary, the Demon Subduing Master Association, which fought against demon beasts, was extremely prosperous. It could even be mentioned in the same breath as the Shenwu dynasty's government office in the northern frontier. Zhanshan City, as the first pass of the Shenwu dynasty against the Hengduan mountain range, was also the route that the northern frontier army had to pass through. Originally, it was only established near the Hengduan mountain range to trade demon beasts materials and spiritual items. Later, a large amount of resources accumulated through trade piled up and became the frontline pass of the Hengduan mountain range. But on the other hand, whether it was from the northern frontier or from other places, one would have to pass through many passes. Then, one would have to pay the entrance tax, lodging fee, and travel fee. After the transaction, one would have to pay the tax according to one's income. The tax rate of the Shenwu dynasty was not the kind of tax rate in Lin Yuan's previous life. For merchants, paying the tax once was equivalent to cutting their flesh with a knife. Not to mention that no matter what route one took, one would have to pay the tax at least 3 times. Therefore, after Lin Yuan took over the northern frontier, he did not hesitate to tear down those passes. After all, he did not have to worry about the demon beasts going against him. Then, he established the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and included most of the transactions in his own hands. Firstly, monopolizing the market would allow him to reap a large amount of dividends. Secondly, once the market was saturated, he could adjust the price at any time without worrying about being hit hard by disrupting the market. This was the experience of his previous life. It was far from what the merchants of the feudal era could think of. Lei Qiuxing might have thought of it, but compared to doing business, he preferred to directly collect taxes. After all, the northern frontier was a place of exile in his eyes. Whether it was rich or poor did not have much to do with him. When passing by the ruins of Zhanshan City, Lin Yuan glanced at the area called Forest of Hungry Ghosts. A large number of Black Water Army were stationed nearby. Some youths wearing the Northern Frontier Academy's uniform were walking and stopping under the guidance of their respective instructors. From time to time, they would bury a few items or draw formation patterns. This was also Lin Yuan's special request. After all, in the Forest of Hungry Ghosts, there was still the number 1 Azura, Liquor Sword Xian. Now, he already knew what these so-called immortals were. As for whether Liquor Sword Xian would turn into an Azura after his death or be turned into an Azura by the alien monster using the elixir of immortality, he had already made a decision. The so-called elixir of immortality was just the nether blood sea that was somewhat similar to the black water of the nether realm. The Nether River ancestor and the Azura tribe were all born from it. Lin Yuan had never seen the real nether blood sea. Although he could use myths and legends for reference, what he had seen and heard during this period was still somewhat different from what really happened in the untainted world. After all, in the orthodox history of the untainted world that Hong Jun had fabricated, he would not explicitly tell the future generations that the so-called investiture of the gods was originally a farce. Its purpose was only to suppress the human race and humanity. Similarly, he would not clearly state why the Yellow Emperor was so cruel and why Red Cloud Taoist was so gullible. Before seeing it with his own eyes, Lin Yuan would not make any certain judgment. But in a sense, the Nether Blood Sea was indeed a substance similar to the black water of the Nether realm. Those immortals did not seem to be any different from the Nether River creatures created by the black water of the Nether realm. It was just that Lin Yuan's Nether River creatures beside him were no different from when they were alive, except that their bodies were completely black. However, unless the immortals stored a large amount of the elixir of immortality, which contained an unknown active substance, they were like the zombies in the movies of his previous life. Other than being unable to be killed, there was really nothing to fear about such brainless monsters. Of course, Lin Yuan would not think that his black water of the Nether realm was more powerful than the Nether Blood Sea. After all, other than the Sky Demon, the Nether River Patriarch had also used the Nether Blood Sea to create a powerful species like the Azura tribe. If it was the current Lin Yuan, he really would not be able to do the same thing. Well, the Azura tribe might not be the Nether River Patriarch's family tribe. After all, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva oversaw the Nether Blood Sea with the purpose of converting the Azura tribe into the Western sect. If they were a family tribe, the Western sect would not be able to do this no matter how powerful they were. Just like the gray-scaled flood dragon people under Lin Yuan's command. Even if they were Lin Yuan's followers, they would not easily betray Lin Yuan and switch to other faiths. On the other hand, these Sky Demon, which had never been recorded, would self-destruct once they betrayed Lin Yuan. They were more like a family tribe that had been created. After all, by spending a large amount of incense power, it was indeed possible to create a similar setting for a family tribe. And for an old monster like the Nether River Patriarch who had lived for who knows how many years, it was not surprising that he had so much incense power. There was an 80% chance that the Wine Sword Mystery was a natural Azura. Although the Wine Sword Mystery had been hiding his identity in the northern frontier in his later years, when the Thousand Swords dynasty was still around, this Sword King could indeed be said to have fought for his entire life. If not for the fact that the Wine Sword Mystery had placed all his attribute points on his personal strength and not on the path of commanding an army, the Azure River, Thousand Swords and Frost Mirror empires would not only have the 4 great war gods. For such a person to turn into an Azura after death, it was indeed in accordance with the rules of the Azura Dao. As for the fact that this world did not have the Azura Dao, however, the will of the Sky Martial World had always been trying to complete itself. The Heavenly Emperor and the Nether King had all been chosen, and the Human King was probably about to be chosen. When the 3 realms were established, it would be time to set up an existence similar to the Heavenly Court and the Underworld. Was it a rare thing to set up the 6 paths of reincarnation in advance? Therefore, the natural Azura Wine Sword Mystery, Lin Yuan must take him under his command. Chapter 1024. Although Lin Yuan did not want to become the god of the underworld of Tianwu world and be bound to this world, with the all-life scripture, if he could cultivate it, Lin Yuan would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the laws. Not to mention the world will, even if the world will gave birth to the 3 Daos of heaven, earth and man, it would not be able to control Lin Yuan's will. When the price was high enough, Lin Yuan would be able to do whatever he wanted in Tianwu world, or to be more precise, modify and set up a portion of the laws. This was how cultivation was. Transforming one's demonic energy and astral energy into various special effects was actually using the power of the laws. Therefore, a great cultivator would be able to do whatever he wanted with a clap of his hands. After becoming a true god, Lin Yuan would go one step further and forcefully suppress the power of the laws. Compared to being silent, it was more like directly crippling one's technique and then relying on the strength of one's physical body. A great cultivator was destined to be inferior to a true god, not to mention a true god who could continue to use techniques. Below the true god, everyone was an ant. And the all-life scripture was a level higher than that of a true god. It was no longer purely controlling and suppressing the power of the laws. A true god suppressing a great cultivator's power of the laws had a time limit, but cultivating the all-life scripture directly changed it. The general idea was that if you were my enemy and I said you were a cripple, you would really become a cripple unless you also had the power to change the laws. In the great wasteland world, the all-life scripture was a straightforward way to become a saint. This was not some heavenly Tao saint, but a true primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal. The earth immortals, heavenly immortals and true gods in the great wasteland world already had an endless lifespan, but after every era, they would have to go through 3 calamities and 9 disasters, as well as the 5 decay of heaven and man. In other words, they would have to undergo a tribulation every one of 1,399,860,000 years. If they could successfully pass the tribulation, they would be able to continue living freely in the new era. If they could not pass, the so-called immortal would not even have a corpse left behind. In the novels of his previous life, those who could leave behind a corpse after death were all world-shaking experts. This was not without reason. In other words, in the great desolate world, if one was not strong to a certain extent, leaving a complete corpse was an extravagant hope. The Heavenly Way sage entrusted his primordial spirit to the Heavenly Way. The so-called indestructible meant that he did not need to go through the tribulation at all. Even if he did not survive the tribulation, he could still reconstruct his primordial spirit from the Heavenly Way. Although he would lose his cultivation every time he reconstructed his primordial spirit, with the support of the Heavenly Way, he was not someone ordinary people in the untainted land could compete with. As for the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal, the so-called true sage, it was eternal. When the Heavenly Way sage left the great wasteland world, he would at most have the cultivation of a peak sage to be. However, no matter where the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal went to, he would be a primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal. Because at this stage of cultivation, instead of calling himself a sage, it was better to say that he had become a kind of existence like a rule, just like Pangu who represented force, Yangmei who represented space and time. When one cultivated to the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal, he could transcend everything. He could change the timeline at will, reverse cause and effect, and tamper with the past and the future. In the novels of his previous life, those who fought across the long river of time were already the Almighty of the Almighty. However, this kind of operation was only one of the basic operations for the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal. However, there were not many existences who had attained the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal in the untainted land. According to the information shared by the system, Yang Mei was dissatisfied with Hong Jun imprisoning all living beings in the untainted land and tried to reverse the long river of time. Then, Yang Mei and Hong Jun had a great battle in the long river of time. However, in the end, no one gained the upper hand. Hong Jun had countless magic treasures taken away while Yang Mei was also seriously injured and had to escape from the untainted land. The battle between the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal had always been so simple and unpretentious. If they really fought, it would be in the long river of time. This was because the so-called past and future did not exist in the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal. No matter which timeline you went to, as long as you were against the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal, you would be facing the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal you had seen. Hong Jun had once said, "The small trend can be changed, but the big trend cannot be reversed." This sentence was a warning to all living beings in the untainted land. He did not mind those with evil intentions scheming under his nose. If they had a certain level of strength, Hong Jun would not mind turning a blind eye and giving them better treatment. However, if they tried to overturn cause and effect and change the past to affect the present Hong Jun, then sorry, only death awaited them. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's gaze shifted and a bitter smile appeared on his face. He thought to himself, "No wonder the system said that I was lucky." The Sutra of All Beings is indeed different from other heavenly-level cultivation methods that lead directly to the path of true gods. This is simply a path to sainthood. If not for the jealousy of the heavens, those who cultivate the Sutra of All Beings are destined to attain the primordial chaos grand heavenly immortal. However, the road had to be taken one step at a time, and the rice had to be eaten one bite at a time. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and turned to look at Li Zhongxing beside him. He said in a deep voice, "This king still has some matters to settle. Continue to lead the army forward. If you encounter the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range, directly state the purpose of this king's visit. After that, the entire army will move out and directly go to the demonic beast imperial court to wait for this king's arrival." Understood. Li Zhongxing cupped his fists and responded in a deep voice. In fact, the path into the Hengduan mountain range was not dangerous. After all, after leaving the boundary of mountain-blocking city, they would enter the demonic beast forest. The demonic beasts living in this forest were all spirit awakening realm demonic beasts and wild beasts that could not even be considered demonic beasts. Not to mention the current Northern Frontier Army. Even if he was alone, he could easily slaughter all the creatures in this forest. After passing through the demonic beast forest and entering the Hengduan mountain range, not long after, they would arrive at the Stoneclaw Forest and Scarlet Flame Swamp. These two areas had the Northern Frontier's flag. According to the information provided by the caravan members, Lin Yuan's territory in the Hengduan mountain range was fine. After all, even if they wanted to snatch the position of Beast Lord, the most they could do was to seal off Lin Yuan's path into the Hengduan mountain range. As for touching Lin Yuan's territory in the Hengduan mountain range, that was not too far away. That was equivalent to giving Lin Yuan a slap in the face. Fighting for the position of Beast Lord was one thing, but if you touched someone else's territory, it would be a blood feud that would not end until one side was dead. Just like when Lin Yuan attacked the Scarlet Flame Swamp, he directly killed the Scarlet Flame Crocodile King. This was considered normal in the Hengduan mountain range. Unless the other side had a strong background, a battle involving territory would only end when one side was completely annihilated. After leaving the Northern Frontier Army, Lin Yuan directly twisted his flood dragon body and rushed toward the Hungry Ghost Forest. Chapter 1025. Originally, he did not want to become the god of the underworld because he would be bound by the will of the world. He would not be able to go to the untainted world, let alone return to his previous world. But with the way to become a saint, everything was different. Wouldn't it be better to be one with the Tao and dominate the cycle of reincarnation? And from another point of view, Lin Yuan was quite satisfied with the system of the god of the underworld. If he could find the location of his previous world, Lin Yuan could merge the two worlds. Anyway, he did not know if the previous world was caused by the system or if it was truly exhausted of spiritual qi. Ever since Lin Yuan could remember, it had been in a period of absolute isolation. Not to mention true gods, there were not even many mortals with cultivation. By merging the two worlds, Lin Yuan could directly dominate the underworld. It was not a big deal to break some taboos. At that time, even if he could not directly revive his loved ones, he could arrange a better family in the next life. Of course, the prerequisite was that Lin Yuan could be one with the Tao and completely control the underworld. Empress Pingxin learned a lesson from the mistakes of Lin Yuan. The will of the world was definitely not as ambitious as Hong Jun. But from another point of view, the three Taos of heaven, earth and man were all derived from the will of the world. Even if Lin Yuan was one with the Tao and did not treat the people of the Tianwu world as slaves and prisoners like Hong Jun, the will of the world would not like him. Just in case, it was not wrong to have all 9 Taos of the Tao realm in his hands. Change the formation, from a trapping formation to a killing formation. When this king comes out, directly activate the formation and clean up all the hungry ghosts. Lin Yuan flew over, his voice loud and clear. In an instant, it was transmitted to the ears of the nearby academy disciples and the Blackwater army. At the same time, a red light flashed rapidly in the forest of hungry ghosts. When the bloodlight stopped, hundreds of hungry ghosts' corpses fell down. The wounds on these corpses did not begin to heal. The wounds that were cut by sharp weapons were constantly wriggling with blood flames. As the blood flames grew stronger, the bodies of the hungry ghosts began to gradually wither. Then, the bloody light materialized into the figure of a young man in his 20s. He had delicate features, and one could vaguely see the graceful bearing of Jiu Zhenxian when he was young. He wore a set of blood-red armor, and there was a bulging sphere on his chest. That sphere slowly opened, and it was actually a huge eye with white eyes and black pupils that were filled with blood vessels. As the huge eye opened, the blood flames on the bodies of the hungry ghosts became even more vigorous. After a moment, the hungry ghosts were all turned into ashes. Streaks of gloomy gray gas appeared, and like a torrential sea, they all entered the huge eye. At this time, the aura on Jiu Zhenxuan's body had clearly become stronger. The Azura tribe had a very strange movement. The male Azura were extremely ugly, and it could be said that they were all deformed. The most common form was Neza, who was born as an Azura with 3 heads and 6 arms, or 4 eyes and 4 arms. There were even more terrifying existences with 9 heads and 1,000 eyes, and 8 legs and 990 arms. Someone like Jiu Zhenxian, who retained his previous appearance, with his torso turned into armor and a pair of huge eyes on his chest, was actually considered a rare handsome man in the entire Asura tribe. However, this appearance would still give people a strange and evil feeling. Kill the heavens, kill the earth, kill all living beings. Using killing to prove one's Tao, it is indeed not a bluff. Lin Yuan's voice suddenly sounded. The huge eye on Jiu Zhenxuan's chest turned slightly, and his body turned, facing Lin Yuan, who suddenly appeared behind him. His right arm shook, and it actually turned into a sharp sword. Its texture was like a bone, but it was wrapped with a large amount of black and red demonic qi and blood qi. Just this point was enough for Lin Yuan to raise his attention to deal with it. The Asura demonic qi entering the body was not a joke. After being corroded by the Asura demonic qi, the quality of one's body would be greatly improved, and all kinds of cultivation techniques would be like having the help of the gods. It sounded good, but the more serious the corrosion of the Asura demonic qi was, the more distorted and deformed the person would gradually transform from the original species into the Asura tribe. It was even more ferocious and terrifying than the Asura tribe that was born normally. There was no rationality to speak of, and only endless killing intent and an unending desire to fight remained in their minds. More importantly, when the Asura demonic qi entered the body, there was no way to treat it. According to the teachings of Buddhism, if one wanted to treat the Asura demonic qi entering the body, one had to put down the butcher's knife, eat vegetarian and pray to Buddha. In other words, one had to cultivate one's body and mind to suppress the killing intent and desire to fight in one's heart. Moreover, it was treating the symptoms and not the root cause. The so-called, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha was a lie. Compared to a butcher who slaughtered countless living beings and could become a Buddha after putting down the butcher's knife, it was better to say that the butcher's knife that was controlled by someone could become a Buddha. How could the karma be offset by turning back from the wrong path? Even if one cultivated one's body and mind to suppress the Asura demonic qi, as time passed, the corrosion would become more and more serious. Moreover, in this life, one absolutely could not kill anymore. Otherwise, once the originally suppressed Asura demonic qi erupted, it would be uncontrollable. Lin Yuan did not want to try whether his dragon scales could withstand Jiu Zhenxuan's sword, nor did he want to try whether he could suppress the Asura demonic qi that could turn people into demons. Because in history, there was a very typical example. The Prince of Lanling, Gao Chonggong, was one of the 4 most beautiful men. Although he was a famous general in history, he was ridiculed by the enemy because of his handsome appearance when he joined the army in his early years. Even the soldiers under his command were dissatisfied with him, so he made himself a mask that looked like an evil ghost. After putting on the mask, he became the Prince of Lanling, who was feared by the enemy. However, as time passed, even if he took off the mask, he could no longer be the cultured, refined and well-educated gentleman he used to be. He had completely turned into a ruthless slaughterer on the battlefield. This was also a lesson learned from the transformation of a human into a Shura. Compared to Lin Yuan's scruples, Jiu Zhenxian was obviously much more straightforward. Since he had his own consciousness, he had been wandering in the hungry ghost forest, acting according to his obsession when he was alive, constantly killing the hungry ghosts lurking in this dense forest. Asura did not have the concept of cultivation. The only way for Asura to become stronger was to rely on killing, just like Lin Yuan killing other creatures and extracting attribute points through the system. It was just that the efficiency of Asura becoming stronger through killing was very low, and the side effects were very great. Now, when he killed the hungry ghosts, it was very difficult for him to improve himself. In other words, the hungry ghosts that were becoming more and more difficult to support under his hands could no longer satisfy his growing desire to fight because of the side effects. If it was not for his obsession when he was alive that was strong to a certain extent, he would have left the hungry ghost forest long ago and hunted the cultivators in the northern frontier. Chapter 1026. However, the existence of a strong obsession in his life, although the wine sword Mysterious missed the best period of development in the chaos of the northern frontier, it was not completely without benefits. At least at this time, there was no cultivation force in the northern frontier who had an unresolvable blood feud with him. This further simplified what Lin Yuan needed to do after subduing him. Moreover, Shura was an immortal existence in the Shura realm. Even if he was beaten to a pulp, he could be resurrected with the help of the will of the Shura realm. Otherwise, A group of Shura with an extremely strong desire to fight would be left with only a few after a long time. However, the Shura outside the Shura realm did not have such an immortal body. In the northern frontier, a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons, if one was unlucky, one might encounter some monsters. If he had not been staying in the Hungry Ghost Forest, it was really hard to say who would hunt who. However, during this period of time in the Hungry Ghost Forest, the Wine Sword Mysterious had indeed laid a good foundation. At least he could kill hundreds of hungry ghosts in an instant. He definitely could not do it when he was alive. It was not that the Wine Sword Mysterious was much stronger than when he was alive. The main reason was that the Wine Sword Mysterious was now much younger. There was a saying in Lin Yuan's previous life, "Random fists can kill the old master." Even if it was another world, this sentence was also applicable. Not to mention mortals, even if the cultivator, after a certain age, even if the lifespan still had hundreds of years, the body organs would also age to a certain extent. If there was a negative state such as internal injury, poisoning, and so on, this aging would be even more serious. The Wine Sword Mysterious had honed his swordsmanship to a very strong level. Although he had not stepped into the Kongming realm, he could kill the cultivator who was also at the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm. At most, he only needed to use 5 swords. And the physical fitness of the Wine Sword Mysterious when he was alive, if he went all out, he would use 30 swords at most, and his blood would decline and his aura would be exhausted. It was estimated that this was also the reason why the Wine Sword Mysterious was trapped in the Hungry Ghost Forest. No matter how high the explosion and damage were, it could not stop your opponent from being killed at all, right? Before the Golden Immortal, even if the cultivator had the same lifespan as the heaven and earth, there was the 5 decay of celestial being, let alone the Heaven Dipper realm cultivator whose lifespan was only a few hundred years. The young Wine Sword Mysterious could undoubtedly explode more terrifying damage, and the time he could fight would last for a long time. Therefore, it would be very troublesome. Lin Yuan's gaze turned slightly, and when it landed on Wine Sword Profound, he clearly saw greed from the huge eyeball on his chest. The Tao of Azura was the Tao of killing the heaven, killing the earth, and killing all living beings. This was the great wish that the old ancestor of the Nether River had set when he created the Azura sect. Therefore, even when he saw Lin Yuan, who was the god of the underworld, Wine Sword Xian did not show any reverence. Instead, he looked at Lin Yuan as if he was looking at a prey. This was because Wine Sword Xian had not recovered much of his intelligence and was still in the stage of acting on instinct. He subconsciously thought that as long as he killed Lin Yuan, he would be able to obtain unimaginable benefits. If it were any other creature, they might have to consider whether or not they were a match for Lin Yuan, or whether or not they could take all of the rewards after killing Lin Yuan. But the Azura race's temperament was still there. "You want to kill me? Just do it." Whoosh! A sharp sound of breaking through the air rang in his ears. In Lin Yuan's sight, Wine Sword Mysterious suddenly disappeared. After a moment, a cold light appeared in Lin Yuan's sight. The bone sword easily penetrated Lin Yuan's head, but Wine Sword Mysterious' face did not show the slightest joy. Instead, he waved the bone sword and began to look at the surrounding jungle with vigilance. At this time, the afterimage that Lin Yuan left on the spot slowly dissipated. Even though Happy was not sure what kind of Azura Wine Sword Enigma had transformed into, based on the previous few encounters, Wine Sword Enigma's awakened ability should be extreme speed. Moreover, it was not the extreme speed of a certain swordmaster, but will, instant, and sword arrival. As an assassin-type character with extremely strong explosive power, awakening such a talent ability was simply a good start. Coupled with the Azura demon energy contained in the bone sword, even if it could not kill the enemy in one hit, it could still seriously injure the enemy. Or, even if it was only a slight injury, it was equivalent to victory, because the Azura demon energy would constantly corrode the opponent, turning the opponent into a half-Azura state that only knew how to kill. In a sense, this could also be considered as killing the opponent. But there was obviously a difference between extreme speed and extreme speed. It was just like the speed competition between the two superheroes in a certain manga adaptation of a movie in Lin Yuan's previous life. Who was faster, the Flash or Superman? Normally, the fully developed Superman would definitely not be as fast as the Flash who put all his attribute points into speed, but the comparison was also very obvious. The ordinary Superman's speed was inferior to the Flash, but the Silver Super could easily break the space-time barrier. Its speed was not comparable to the Flash. The current Lin Yuan and Wine Sword Mysterious were like the difference between the Silver Super and the Flash. Lin Yuan did not deny that Wine Sword Mysterious extreme speed talent was very fast. But after all, there was almost a whole realm gap here. If it was purely comparing speed, coupled with the effect of the Eye of God, Wine Sword Mysterious extreme speed stab in Lin Yuan's eyes was almost the same as a movie scene that was slowed down by 0.25 times. Lin Yuan suddenly appeared behind Wine Sword Mysterious. His eyes were cold, sea-suppressing tail. As the black flood dragon tail smashed on the body of the Wine Sword Mystic, a terrifying force suddenly leaked out. The basic attributes of the desolate demon realm plus the true damage attached to the tail of the sea-suppressing beast showed an extremely explosive visual effect. Even the Wine Sword Mystic, who was much stronger than the ordinary Heaven Dipper realm, was almost torn apart by Lin Yuan's blow. The huge eyeball on his chest was full of blood, as if it was going to burst at any time. Boom! Wine Sword Mysterious, who was sent flying, broke hundreds of trees in a row, almost piercing through dozens of miles of woodland. However, before Wine Sword Mysterious landed, his body exploded into a cloud of blood mist in mid-air. When the blood mist dissipated, a huge Dharma image of a few hundred feet appeared. It was a huge figure that sat cross-legged on the ground. The armor-like red skin did not change, but Wine Sword Mysterious' face was now covered with a pitch-black cuticle. Scarlet eyes opened from the cuticle one after another. Just a rough look, there were no less than 1,000 of them. Before the change was over, Wine Sword Mysterious' Dharma idol changed again. The red skin on his arms began to bulge out one by one, and as the flesh ball was broken open, an incomparably thick arm grew out. Adding the two sides together, there were almost 1,000 hands. 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes, still only in Heaven Dipper realm, but he can manifest the image of Azura King. Should I say that he is worthy of being one? Lin Yuan secretly clicked his tongue. Chapter 1027. Thousands of arms waved at will, and bone weapons began to gradually appear. Lin Yuan could even see the flesh fragments attached to those weapons, but what was more eye-catching was the surging Azura demonic energy near the wind blades of those weapons. At this moment, the Wine Sword Mystery looked extremely evil and treacherous. He's more powerful than I thought. It seems that he's really tricky. Lin Yuan's blue-white vertical pupils rolled slightly, and he smiled bitterly. When he launched the sea-suppressing tail, Lin Yuan was actually still hesitating. Even though Wine Sword Mystery became much younger after transforming into an Azura, he was just a Heaven Gang realm cultivator. However, the Taoist master of the Azura Dao was destined to enjoy the status of an Earth Sage. If he accidentally killed Wine Sword Mystery, where could he find a second Azura? Where could he create a stage for him to quickly improve his ability? But since he had launched the skill, there was no room for mercy. So Lin Yuan was betting that Wine Sword Mystery, the first natural Azura in the Heaven Martial World, was powerful enough. After all, he was bound to fight with him. Even if his realm was higher than his, it was easy for him to fail miserably and be controlled by Wine Sword Mystery. But he didn't expect that Wine Sword Mystery would turn around and give him such a huge surprise, or rather, a huge shock. Lin Yuan had not seen any weak creatures in the Untainted Land. Even Hamba, Luo Yu, Fox Demon and the like were actually some famous fierce characters in the Untainted Land. Wine Sword Mystery left his name in such a cruel world. No matter how he thought about it, he would not be easy to deal with. But the key of the Untainted Land was there, which was far from a spirit space like the Heaven Martial World. Not to mention the manifestation of the rules, like the 3,000 ancient demon gods. Even ordinary natural living beings had the cultivation not inferior to true gods when they were born. Even the weakest human race in the Untainted Land at that time could have the cultivation of a celestial immortal after little serious cultivation. Heaven Gang realm cultivators in the Untainted Land were most likely to be crushed like ants. But what about Wine Sword Mystery? Not only did this fellow withstand the full force attack of Lin Yuan, who was at the 8th level of the desolate demon realm, but what was even more terrifying was that he only became serious after the pain and directly revealed his Azura clan Dharma idol. He was hundreds of meters tall, had 1,000 hands and eyes, and this was not something that those green-faced fierce-looking Azuras could compare to. This is the Azura King. The huge eye on Jiu Zhenxuan's chest turned, and thousands of arms holding bone weapons heavily smashed towards Lin Yuan. The Azura demonic chi seemed to have completely replaced the original gang chi. It whistled around the bone weapons, and terrifying sonic booms rang out continuously. At this moment, Lin Yuan even felt that the entire world was shaking. The surrounding air was constantly being compressed. Even Lin Yuan felt as if he had fallen into a swamp and was unable to move. I can't dodge it. Lin Yuan quickly made a judgment. Although he could still move, in this situation where his speed was slowed down countless times, no matter how hard he tried, he could not escape the attack range of these thousand-bone weapons. He could only take it head-on. Lin Yuan's eyes turned slightly, and endless nether realm black water gushed out from the gaps of his scales. When it fell to the ground, it did not turn into ferocious nether river creatures. Instead, it remained liquid and gradually solidified, turning into weapons made of black ice. At first glance, it seemed that they were not much smaller than those bone weapons. Although he could not mobilize the Wei River for his own use from far away like Luo Yu, as the god in charge of the Nether River, Lin Yuan could turn his demon power and the power of incense into nether realm black water at any time, and he could also exert the power of the King of Water and the invisible ice. As for using the Nether River creatures to block the attack, that kind of behavior seemed to be no different from that of the supporting role in novels. As a Azura who relied on killing to become stronger, no matter what it was, as long as it could be killed, it could be turned into nourishment. Those hungry ghosts transformed from the Nether Realm Blood Sea were still as weak as ordinary creatures in the hands of Jiu Zhenxian, and there was no chance for them to be reborn. If it were Lin Yuan's Nether River creatures, there would be no change. Facing the Azura alone was actually a good tactic. While fighting, he gave experience to the Azura. How retarded must one be to do such a thing? Bang! 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 As the bone weapon and the black ice weapon collided, the sound of metal hitting metal rang out continuously. The terrifying airwaves caused by the collision of the Azura demon chi and the death chi of the Nether River also spread in all directions. In an instant, the surrounding plants withered and withered. Even if a Heaven Gang realm cultivator was here, a large amount of vitality would be instantly sucked away, and he would become an old man. Bas! As the two fought more and more, the surrounding space barrier could no longer bear the burden and suddenly burst open. A large amount of the death chi of the Nether River and the Azura demon chi leaked out, and it immediately attracted the attention of the big shots in the Sea of Misery. A kind-looking old man with white hair and a white beard and dressed in green was slightly stunned. He waved his hand, and the ripples caused by the spatial fluctuations appeared in the Sea of Misery, directly crushing tens of thousands of sky demon. Only then did he let out a soft cry of surprise and turn to look at the extremely weak world that even his incarnation could not bear. Natural Azura? Interesting, interesting. The old ancestor of Yang Mei stroked his beard with one hand and his eyes turned slightly. He smiled and said, I thought this kid was just ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth. I didn't expect that his ambition is so big. Since that's the case, let me help you. As soon as he finished speaking, the old ancestor of Yang Mei flicked his right hand, and a strand of hair leisurely floated down leisurely. It immediately turned into a sharp green light and swept into the spatial crack of the sky martial world. To be honest, the old ancestor of Yang Mei was a very casual existence. Not everything was worth his attention. Even if someone offended the old ancestor of Yang Mei for some kind of opportunity, as long as it was based on oneself, he could laugh and just say that it was fate, and would not make a fuss about it. So far, there were not many existences that had truly angered the old ancestor of Yang Mei. The one ranked first was Hong Jun, who had integrated with the Way of Heaven. But to be honest, the old ancestor of Yang Mei was stronger than Hong Jun in both cultivation and shrewdness. Even if Hong Jun had integrated with the Way of Heaven and fought with the old ancestor of Yang Mei in the long river of time, both of them would have suffered losses. If the old ancestor of Yang Mei was as ambitious as Hong Jun, the matter of integrating with the Way of Heaven and dominating the untainted land would not have been Hong Jun's turn at all. Therefore, when Lin Yuan did not give him face, he was only slightly angry, but far from the point where he had to kill Lin Yuan. Now that he had seen something interesting, he naturally would not turn a blind eye to it. Chapter 1028. On the other side, Lin Yuan, who was in the midst of a fierce battle with the Azura King's Dharma form, suddenly shifted his gaze. This was because he had already seen an incomparably sharp green light suddenly sweep out from the crack in space. With his dynamic vision, he naturally could clearly see what that green light was. A verdant willow branch. The Patriarch of Yang Mei had made his move. F***CK. Lin Yuan's heart suddenly sank. He had yet to see the Patriarch of Yang Mei with his own eyes, so naturally, He did not know what kind of temperament the Patriarch of Yangmei had. Although from the perspective of the factions, both sides were comrades in the fight against Hongjun, but even as a system host, Lin Yuan did not feel that the other hosts were necessarily harmonious and friendly. The Eldritch world was originally a boundless world. Over the years, Hongjun had conquered countless worlds and conquered countless worlds. Just the heavenly court alone had 33 heavens. But then again, even if there were countless creatures in the Eldritch world, only a handful could become experts, and only a few could reach the pinnacle. It was true that the system was very powerful. But in the end, it was only the origin of the Eldritch world's heavenly Tao, and the kind that was incomplete. How far could one reach by relying on the system's power? Unless one was as unbelievably lucky as Lin Yuan and did not grow step by step according to the system's arrangements, and even obtain the universal scripture, which could lead one directly to the path of chaos zenith heaven, otherwise, according to the system's arrangements, one could only reach the position of a heavenly Tao sage at the extreme. Moreover, there was a limit to the heavens, and the karma of the 9 heavenly Tao sages were right there. How powerful would one have to be able to kill Hongjun and dethrone the other 8 heavenly Tao sages? Even if one could really reach that step, but there were still more than 7,000 system hosts. More than 7,000 people fighting for the karma of the 9 heavenly Tao sages. Who could guarantee that they would succeed? There were some things that couldn't be thought too far ahead. Just by thinking about it a little, one could feel that the future would be filled with bloodshed. Similarly, they were basically all existences that fought against Hongjun. Primitive bigwigs such as sect leader Tong Tian and the Patriarch of Yangmei had the same purpose as the system, but they each had their own interests. How much kindness could you expect from those primitive bigwigs when their own people would kill each other? In addition, the appearance of the 2 demon foxes from before had angered Lin Yuan due to their natural transformation. Even though they could suppress their inner demons, they did not hold back in their anger. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not even need to think about it to know that he had definitely offended the Patriarch of Yangmei. He had forgotten about this when he was fighting with Wine Sword Mystery. The Patriarch of Yangmei had not left yet. The willow branch swayed slightly in mid-air, and suddenly, a green light shone brightly. This time, even Lin Yuan could not see what the willow branch looked like. A moment later, the entire Starved Ghosts forest was enveloped by the green light, and the terrifying suppression brought by the Azura King's Dharma form disappeared instantly. Is this helping me? Lin Yuan was slightly stunned. He turned his head and looked at the green light not far behind him. He had a vague feeling. The green light was like the rain curtain that he had created with the power of incense. As long as he did not want to, no one could enter or leave. Unless the other party was willing to use the power of incense to open a temporary door. In other words, this Starved Ghosts forest had been completely isolated by the willow branch into an independent small world. At this moment, it was like an extremely bloody arena. Unless the Patriarch of Yangmei withdrew his divine power, no one could leave this space. This is a primordial chaos zenith heaven? As expected of a mighty person who had proven a certain law. Even if they left the chaos world, they could still change a world into what they wanted with a wave of their hand. The so-called will of the world was nothing in front of powerful beings like them. While he did not know why the Patriarch of Yangmei would help him at this time, Lin Yuan's thoughts turned slightly, and his eyes flashed with joy. The Azura race was bloodthirsty, but the Azura race were not fools. After the primordial world had developed for countless years, the Azura race that the Nether River Patriarch had created was no longer the original composition. Countless generals and heroes had fought in the mortal world, and many of them had been received into the Azura realm after death. Could these people who had left their mark in history be fools? To give an example, the calm martial lord of the Qin Bai Qi had killed his entire life, and was called the god of killing. The calm martial lord of the Zhao country, Li Mu, was often called the turtle general, but when he moved, he almost destroyed the Donghu race. The Azura race's desire to fight was strong. But their battle intelligence was not fake. Do not think that facing the Azura race was a fight to the death. When the Azura race thought that he was not your match, he would still do things like running away. Unless in the Azura realm, everyone had an undying body, then naturally it was a fight to the death. The old ancestor of the Yangmei had acted to isolate this space. First, it gave Lin Yuan a chance to use the tiger's skin. After all, until now, Lin Yuan had already had powerful existences that surpassed the understanding of the natives of the Tianwu world. And this time, The old ancestor of the Yangmei had acted to isolate heaven and earth. The experts of the outside world naturally could not see what was happening here. Sometimes, once people started to imagine things, it was easy for them to attack themselves. Second, by isolating heaven and earth, even if Zhou Zhenxian had not been serious before, now that he had erupted with an even more terrifying speed, he would not be able to escape this battlefield. Lin Yuan did not need to worry that Zhou Zhenxian would run away. Now that heaven and earth are isolated, even if you have thousands of methods, you can only fight with me here. However, the difference in strength between you and me is huge, like comparing a firefly to the moon. You are a natural Azura. You should be the Azura Dao Lord under this king. If you submit to this king can give you the great way to become a saint. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and did not rush to attack. Instead, he stared at Zhou Zhenxian with shining eyes. Although he had some plans, he was not sure whether he could really merge with the Great Way. If he could not do it, he would not take the risk. Otherwise, it would be bad if he suffered a loss like Hutu. After all, Hutu was tricked by Hong Jun and turned into samsara. She not only tricked herself, but also the whole Wu tribe. In the untainted world, the war between the Wu tribe and the demon tribe had seriously injured the demon tribe. Even the ancient demon court had been destroyed. Eastern Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun had suffered losses. Even the cosmic stars formation had been broken. At the end of the war, the pillar of heaven had collapsed. Even the untainted world had been shattered. However, in this cultivation tribulation, neither the Wu tribe nor the demon tribe had gained any advantage. On the contrary, the human tribe had surpassed them and opened the era of 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. Chapter 1029. If the 12 ancestors of sorcery were all present, they could set up the 12 sky demon divine formation and condense the real body of Pan Gu. Everyone below the sage level would be invincible. Even the demon race would not be able to gain any advantage, not to mention the human race who were just food to the other races in the untainted land. Even if they were injured, they would not be sacrificed to the human race. The entire sorcerer race had even left the stage of the untainted land. The remaining sorcerer race could only hide in the netherworld and seek protection from Empress Pingxin. As for the calamity of the great war between sorcerer and demon, it was not only the human race that benefited. In addition to the beginning of the era of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, even Hongjuan's disciple, San Qing, had created his own sect. The rise of the Ren sect, the Jie sect, and the Chan sect had started the Xianmen era where Hong Jun was respected. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan broke out in a cold sweat. Hongjuan's plan was too terrifying. When he was not powerful enough, he could sit back and watch the sorcerer and demon race fight. At the same time, he secretly set up a trap and reaped the benefits. Although he promoted the human race, he suppressed the Tao. He shared the Tao of heaven with the 3 sovereigns and suppressed the emergence of the Tao of humanity. When the other 2 Tao were completely suppressed, he revealed his fangs. He merged with the Tao of heaven and became the supreme ruler of the untainted land. This was not the end. After all, in the eyes of the sorcerer race, there was no difference between the human race and the demon race. After all, Goddess Nviwa was the sage of the demon race. Although the human race that she created did not get along well with the demon race, in the eyes of the sorcerer race, they were people who deserved to be killed. Later on, Qi Yu led an army to suppress the Yen Emperor and caused chaos in the world. The Yellow Emperor took advantage of the situation and killed Qi Yu at the Green Mountains, becoming the Yellow Emperor Shen Yuan. Lin Yuan was confused. Lin Yuan suddenly paused. Killed Qi Yu at the Green Mountains? Why, the Green Mountains? The Yellow Emperor and Qi Yu had their last battle at the Green Mountains. After that battle, the Green Mountains were destroyed. Although Green Hill was like a paradise, it was still a demonic country. Even if the people of Green Hill stood aloof from worldly affairs, the Great Witch Demon War was a calamity that ran through the entire Eldritch world. Logically speaking, as long as they were in the calamity, they would not be spared. Didn't you see that the Jie sect, which was known as the 10,000 Immortals, was annihilated in the God Investiture Tribulation? Only the incongruence Divine Mother, who was not contaminated by the tribulation aura, survived. No matter how strong the Qingqiu demons were, could they be stronger than Jie school? Therefore, the ancestors of the Qingqiu tribe must have participated in the Great Witch Demon War. Qi Yu had no reason to flee to the Qingqiu tribe because he was a member of the Witch tribe. With this innate factor, The Qingqiu tribe could not possibly have a good impression of him, much less help him. Therefore, Qiyu could only have been chased all the way by the Yellow Emperor. Then, the question was, why did the Yellow Emperor set the location of the final battle at the Qingqiu tribe? Furthermore, the battle between the two armies had directly destroyed the Qingqiu tribe. Emperor Huang Xianyuan became Guang Chengzi's disciple. Guang Chengzi was one of the 12 golden immortals of Chan school. What did the heavenly primogenitor mean? No, it was Hongjuan's idea. Then, what did the Qingqiu tribe have to be targeted by the Dao ancestor Hongjun? At this time, Hongjun should still be setting up. It was because of the destruction of the Qingqiu tribe that the Su clan, one of the Qingqiu tribe's bloodline, hated the Yellow Emperor. However, the Yellow Emperor was not an existence that the Su clan could charm. When Su Daji cultivated into a nine-tailed fox, the human king was already Dxin. The god investiture tribulation had already been set up during the period of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. But why the Qingqiu tribe? Why the fox tribe? Was it because the fox tribe was good-looking and naturally charming? Bullshit. There were many races in the eldritch world that were born good-looking. Which of the mermaids in the sea and the flower demons in the deep mountains was worse than the fox tribe? Therefore, the Qingqiu tribe was targeted because there was an existence behind them that Hongjun wanted to deal with. The 2 fox demons of the Chenghu clan and Su clan said that they were backed by the patriarch Yang Mei, while the Su clan was a branch of the Qingqiu tribe. Furthermore, the patriarch Yang Mei had always kept a low profile. Why did he have a grudge with Hongjun? Therefore, the patriarch Yang Mei was the mighty figure behind the Qingqiu tribe? Yes, that should be the case. The Qingqiu kingdom was a place that stood aloof from worldly affairs. There were many races that could not be seen in the outside world. Looking at the overall situation, it was after the Great War between the shamans and demons, the era of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. The various vassals of the human race were fighting, the remnants of the human race and the demon race were fighting, and the 3 religions were fighting for Taoist orthodoxy. It could be said that the entire eldritch world was filled with the flames of war. Why was the Qingqiu kingdom standing aloof from worldly affairs? That was because they were backed by a mighty figure that could reach the heavens, a mighty figure that all the experts of the time feared. It was terrifying to think about. More importantly, he was now targeted by Hongjun. Would this mighty figure, who had almost run through the entire history of the eldritch world, who could trample countless outstanding figures of the eldritch world under his feet, end things so hastily? Was it really as simple as sending down a consciousness projection and leaving when he saw that he could not kill him? You want me to submit to you? Are you worthy? While Lin Yuan was brainstorming, the wine sword mystic, who had turned into an Azura king, snorted. As a natural Azura, although the wine sword mystic did not have the wisdom of those peerless ruthless people in the history of Lin Yuan's previous life, who were led into the Azura realm after death, as the Sword King of the 10,000 Swords dynasty, he still retained his pride even without the memories of his life. What was a sword? It would rather break than bend. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Lin Yuan muttered. The next moment, the pseudo-law phenomenon of heaven and earth was launched, revealing a body that was more than 3,000 feet long. The rich and majestic demon aura almost formed a gray cloud above his head. The aura of the 8th level of the desolate demon realm broke out, and it pressed down on the wine sword mystery like a mountain. The wine sword mystic roared, and his figure changed again. He expanded by more than 100 times. As the Azura demon aura surged, a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood was formed behind him. That was the scene of hundreds of thousands of troops of the Shenwu dynasty besieging his fief after Lei Qiuxing usurped the throne. In that battle, blood flowed like a river. Although he did not save anything in the end, for example, the Shenwu dynasty still replaced the 10,000 Swords dynasty, and his fief was also broken by the army of the Shenwu dynasty. The generals under Lei Qiuxing's command were blocked for too long, and they ordered a massacre for 3 days out of anger. Even if he had no memories of his life, he still felt the monstrous anger in his heart when the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood appeared. Kill! 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 It was like the ravings in a dream, and then it was like the sound of a great bell. At the same time, the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood behind the wine sword mystic gradually solidified, and the monstrous killing intent on his body continued to rise. Thousands of arms gradually retracted into his body. At this moment, the wine sword mystic still looked deformed, but compared with the Azura, he looked more like the titans who could launch the twilight of the gods in Lin Yuan's previous life. Chapter 10:30. His growth speed is very fast. If I nurture him well, I'm afraid he will become the peak existence of Sky Martial World before I can create the tunnel. With the completion of the 3 realms and 6 Dao, his future will not stop at this. Lin Yuan's eyes moved slightly, secretly calculating in his heart. When he first saw the wine sword mystery, the other party didn't seem to have any spiritual wisdom. He just subconsciously wanted to kill, but he was still afraid of a powerful existence like the Hidorigami and fled. When Lin Yuan saw him this time, although he still retained the desire to kill, he knew to hide his strength and fight with Lin Yuan. If 2 existences with a small gap in cultivation level fight, waiting for the other party to adapt to the rhythm of the battle, the party hiding his strength suddenly erupts with all his strength, which is enough to complete a surprise kill. And now, he could even open his mouth to communicate with him. This guy's growth speed was very fast. In truth, Lin Yuan did not think much of the natives of Sky Martial World. So even if there were people like Lei Qiuxing and Yan Xingqi, who could be called outstanding existences, Lin Yuan still focused on nurturing young people. After all, loyalty was one aspect, and vision was another. The natives of Sky Martial World were not easy to deal with. Especially the existences of the Heavenly Gate Protectors, to be able to break through to the Void Realm, or even higher, these natives were truly amazing. After all, he was clear about his own situation. Although Lin Yuan did not grow according to the system's plan, his own talent was there. If not for the existence of the system, not to mention stepping into the desolate demon realm in 3 years, Lin Yuan might not even be able to successfully awaken his spirit in these 3 years. But what determined a person's future was not as simple as talent. Broadening one's horizons was equally important. The natives of the Heaven Gate Protectors weren't like their seniors and outstanding peers. They didn't leave the Heaven Martial World for the sake of pursuing a higher realm. Instead, they chose to rule over a small world. This wasn't because they were like those scheming prehistoric creatures, but because they wanted to obtain the secrets of the Heaven Martial World. It was because they were afraid. They were afraid that if they went to a foreign world, the strength that they were so proud of would be at the bottom, and they would lose their current status and wealth. Anyway, if they stayed in Sky Martial World, they could rely on the characteristics of the power of incense, and they could live forever. Why would they take the risk? As soon as that thought appeared in their minds, their paths were cut off. Even if the martial heaven world was repaired in the future, these experts who stood at the peak of the world wouldn't have any advantage. Instead, they would quickly fall out of line with the rest of the world. They would go from being almighty experts to trash that no one cared about. Lin Yuan swung his dragon tail, and the demonic cloud above his head circulated. In an instant, countless rays of black light were cast down, transforming the demonic power into the black water of the netherworld realm to rain. It seemed harmless, but the threat hidden in the strands of black rain was not as simple as it seemed. Even if the other party was a cultivator of the netherworld realm, he would still be on tenterhooks. Betrayers. The huge Azura King celestial body opened its mouth and uttered the word, kill, 4 times in a row. Every time it uttered the word, the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood around it would be destroyed a little bit, and its aura would become stronger. The first was a group of people that Lin Yuan did not recognize, but from their clothes, they seemed to be officials of Wanjian dynasty. Lin Yuan remembered when Jiu Jianxian had just entered the fief, corrupt officials ran amok, and all the people under his rule suffered. Thus, Jiu Jianxian killed people in anger, and almost all the officials in his fief were killed. The second group of people who were destroyed were also dressed in the popular style of Wanjian dynasty, but they were not as noble as the first group of people. However, they were still dressed in extraordinary clothes, and there were men and women, old and young. Undoubtedly, be it Wanjian dynasty or Shenwu dynasty, other than the officials in the imperial court who needed some real talent, the officials who were sent to various places were basically the relatives or disciples of the big shots in the imperial court. After all, the northern frontier relied on real talent, while the other dynasties mostly relied on recommendations. Even if they were incompetent, they could have a good future if they had a good family background. Therefore, the second group of people should be the wealthy families in Jiu Jianxian's fief. Because the corrupt officials were killed, they secretly planned to deal with Jiu Jianxian. In the end, they were defeated by him, and became a stepping stone for Jiu Jianxian to take over. The third group of people who were destroyed were also more than half of Wanjian dynasty. There were men and women, old and young, but their clothes were not uniform. Some were dressed luxuriously, and some were dressed shabbily. They should be the people who were not willing to contribute when Xinwu dynasty attacked Zhou Jianxian and were killed by Zhou Jianxian as a sacrifice. Everyone knew that the merciful could not command soldiers. No matter how good the reputation of a general was, they would not be merciful at the critical moment. The fourth group of people who were destroyed were dressed in completely different clothes, which was obviously the standard equipment of Xinwu dynasty. They were undoubtedly the soldiers who attacked Zhou Jianxian's fief and died under his sword. There were also some people dressed as officials of Xinwu dynasty, who should be the remaining members of the Zhou family who had been active in assassinating people in Xinwu dynasty these years. When these people were destroyed, Zhou Jianxian slowly raised his head, looked straight at Lin Yuan, and said in a deep voice, "Those who humiliate me should be killed." Just then, a virtual image that looked exactly like Lin Yuan appeared in front of Zhou Jianxian. Zhou Jianxian was not stunned, and the bone sword in his right hand suddenly chopped down, directly splitting Lin Yuan's virtual image into two. "Are you threatening me?" Lin Yuan laughed involuntarily. However, in an instant, Lin Yuan's smile froze on his face. Golden blood oozed out from the wound on his waist and dripped down. Like a meteorite, it smashed a deep pit on the ground and raised a large amount of dust and smoke. With the dust and smoke, Lin Yuan's eyes gradually became gloomy. Cutting off the virtual image could cause the same injury on his body. No, it was not the same. That virtual image was cut in half at the waist, but there was only a sword wound on his waist. Fortunately, although the injuries were the same, there was no Azura Devil Chi. Your methods are not bad. Then, it's time for me to get serious. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and the Nether Realm black water no longer continued to fall. Instead, it solidified into a black ice dragon that opened its mouth and roared. It swayed its body like a living creature and flew toward the wine sword mystery. Zhou Jianxian's 1,000 eyes blinked, and the bone sword in his hand chopped out again, directly facing the flying black ice dragon. He did not intend to dodge at all. Chapter 1031. When the bone sword and the ice dragon collided, there was no loud sound, and there was no fluctuation of Azura Chi and Nether River Death Chi. Because the moment the two collided, the huge ice dragon quickly melted, turning into soft and invisible Nether Realm black water. Wine Sword Xuanqian's eyes were filled with shock because the moment the bone sword entered the Nether Realm black water, he felt that the bone sword in his right hand had lost connection with him. It was as if someone had cut it in half, but he didn't feel any pain. As time passed, more and more of the bone sword entered the Nether Realm black water. No matter how hard Wine Sword Xian tried, he could not pull out his right hand. His heart sank, but his actions were not slow. His left hand also turned into a bone sword, and directly cut off his right hand. Looking at his right hand that entered the Nether Realm black water, Wine Sword Xian's head gradually secreted a layer of blood beads of sweat. Too terrifying. Even without the process of fighting, one of his arms was cut off. This was not the end. The pool of Nether Realm black water was like a hungry beast. Although it had eaten some blood food, it still could not suppress its greedy appetite. It once again surged towards Wine Sword Xian's body. The ice dragon lost its initial majesty, but became inexplicably treacherous. Wine Sword Xian retreated rapidly. His speed was extremely fast. The speed of the Nether Realm black water was so fast that ordinary Heaven Dipper realm experts couldn't react to it. However, it still only wrapped around the afterimage of Wine Sword Xian's body. Run! Where can you run to? Lin Yuan looked mockingly at Wine Sword Xian who was retreating. This world was separated by Yang Mei's willow branch. Unless Wine Sword Xian was also in the Origin Daluo realm, it was impossible to leave this world. Run! Where can you run to? After the Nether Realm's black water was converted in large amounts, it became a catastrophe that could swallow anything. Not to mention a small world like the Tianwu world, even if it was placed in a middle world, it was enough to be called a world-destroying disaster. Just like in the legends, when Yu the Great controlled the flood, just the flood and the water demons almost destroyed the human world. He was forced to use the living soil of the ninth heaven, and with the help of Ying Long and the other big shots, he managed to control the flood. Not to mention the Nether Realm's black water, which was even more ferocious, and the Nether River's creatures, which were difficult to kill with ordinary means. Even a greater thousand world like the primitive world would have a headache for a while. Of course, compared to the wrath of nature, a man-made apocalypse was much easier to deal with. For example, If Lin Yuan went to the primeval world to release the Netherrealm Blackwater, he would probably be killed by Hong Jun and the other big shots before the apocalypse reached a large scale. Seeing the Netherrealm Blackwater chasing after the Wine Sword mystery, Lin Yuan once again emptied his mind. It is a good habit to go all out in a battle, but people who really have combat experience know that sometimes subconscious actions are countless times better than the actions made after careful thinking and deduction. The same is true for battles between cultivators. Instead of controlling the Netherrealm Blackwater to predict the landing point of the Wine Sword mystery, Lin Yuan might as well let the Netherrealm Blackwater hunt by itself. In addition to fighting, most cultivators are also pursuing the state of selflessness and selflessness. No matter what the situation is, as long as they are not interrupted, there will always be gains when they come back to their senses. Sometimes, deliberate actions could not be compared to fate. What's more, he didn't really want to kill Jiu Zhenxian. After all, there was only one natural Azura. If he accidentally killed Jiu Zhenxian, Lin Yuan would really have no place to cry. He couldn't set off a war between the 7 dynasties in the future and artificially create a group of Azuras, right? The Wine Sword mystery kept roaring and slashing with the bone sword in his hand, sweeping away the puddles of Netherrealm black water. However, when he came into contact with the Netherrealm black water, he had no choice but to cut off his flesh. Although he was only in his Dharma form and did not cut off his real flesh, every slash was really destroying his own cultivation. His Dharma form of a few hundred feet was now less than 100 feet. He was originally at the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm and was only a step away from it. However, Kong Ming's cultivation had also dropped to the early stage of the Heaven Dipper realm. If this continued, he might not even be able to maintain his Heaven Dipper realm cultivation. If that was all, it would be fine. After all, he was an Azura. If he could escape, he could quickly make up for it by killing in the future. However, the problem was that this world was isolated. Even if he had a lot of means, he would not be able to leave this world. Senior, stop. I am willing to surrender. Senior, please withdraw your supernatural power. The Wine Sword mystery tried his best to dodge the Netherrealm black water while complaining incessantly. Everything had its vanquisher. Those immortals who troubled the northern frontier were just supplements to increase cultivation in the eyes of Azura. However, he could not get close to Lin Yuan at all. He could only slash Lin Yuan once with his supernatural power. Not to mention killing Lin Yuan, it was estimated that he could not even be regarded as a minor injury. If it were not for the fact that they were still fighting, Lin Yuan could easily heal him with his demon power. On the contrary, he could not fight back under Lin Yuan's supernatural power. What is called a sword? Rather break than bend? Don't you know that there is a kind of sword in this world called a soft sword? You are quite stubborn. The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth twitched slightly, and his mind turned. He immediately took the underworld realm's black water back into his body. His gaze fell on the Wine Sword mystery. After pondering for a moment, he said, "This king will not deceive you. This world is about to be completed. At that time, in addition to the human world, the heavenly court and the underworld will be established. The 6 paths of reincarnation will be established in the netherworld. Each pathmaster of the 6 paths will be able to obtain the position of Dao Sage. You are a natural Azura, and you were born at this time, so the position of Azura Pathmaster should be yours." The Wine Sword mystery hesitated for a moment, but did not rush over. Instead, he asked weakly, "Senior, may I ask, Senior, what is a saint of Dao?" Saints were a term used in the untainted world. It was hard to say what they were called in other boundless worlds. They entrusted everything to the 3 paths of heaven, earth and man, and replaced the 3 paths of world will to patrol the world. However, there were similar existences in all boundless worlds. However, in a small world like the Sky Martial world, saint was indeed an extremely unfamiliar term. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and said calmly, "You can understand it as the transcendent realm. As long as you are in this world, under the premise of not disobeying the world will, saint is the strongest realm. There is no past, no future, only the present. It is immortal and has the same lifespan as the world. With a thought, it can change the past and future and reverse karma." The strongest realm? Immortal? Has the same lifespan as the world? The Wine Sword mystery's face suddenly became strange, and his expression became more hesitant. It seemed that he did not quite believe Lin Yuan's words. Chapter 1032. Although Wine Sword Profound did not have the memories of his previous life, he was just a newborn Azura, but his spiritual wisdom was not low. People who had never cultivated would not know how difficult it was to cultivate. Wealth, companions, techniques and land were the four essentials of cultivation, but strictly speaking, if one lacked any of the four essentials of cultivation, it would be difficult to progress in the path of cultivation. Therefore, once a good cultivation method was leaked out, it would instantly set off a reign of terror, and it was even more so in the Sky Martial world. Even a magic-modified version of the soul-sculpting mantra that stopped at the Space Nether realm could create a big red dust society that would laugh proudly in the southern green forest. If it was a higher-level cultivation method, even the first-class and super first-class forces would not care about their face, and would immediately send people to fight for it. Wine Sword Profound still did not know what the so-called Sage Realm was. But he could still understand the concept of being indestructible and having the same lifespan as heaven and earth. Not to mention a newborn Azura, even those famous great cultivators and great demon beasts in the Sky Martial world would yearn for it. Here came the problem. The black dragon in front of him was only in the desolate demon realm. Even if it had strange magical powers, it was only Azo. Let alone a sage, it was still a long way from the top of this world. If there was really a chance to become a sage, would it give it to him for no reason? However, Wine Sword Profound was a newborn Azura, although his spiritual wisdom was not low, but spiritual wisdom and shrewdness were two completely different things. So Lin Yuan could see the hesitation in Wine Sword Profound's eyes with just a glance. Lin Yuan shook his head and said with a chuckle, "You are doubting me. Because if I had the method to become a sage, my cultivation would not stop at the desolate demon realm, right? I just don't understand." Zhou Zhenxian did not hesitate at all. Instead, he replied in an extremely sincere manner. "This king is afraid that you still don't understand, so to speak simply, this world is vast and boundless, but it is not complete. Whether it is the cultivators or demon beasts in this world, they will all stop at the ancestor demon realm. Those who claim to have advanced further, in fact, have not changed in essence, but compared to those who have just entered, they have accumulated a little more. If they wanted to reach a higher level, they would have to leave this world and head to other medium-class worlds or upper-class worlds. This was because there was a limit to the capacity of a small-class world. Even if they accumulated enough Joss flames to break through, the will of this world would not allow them to do so. In the early years, there were still cultivators who left this world in pursuit of a higher realm. However, ever since the Guardian of the Heaven's Gate was established, not a single cultivator or demonic beast had left. In my opinion, those who think they can be the overlords of the minor Kiliacosm will suffer the consequences of their own actions in the near future. When the Heavenly Court and the Netherworld are established in this world from the chaos and the three realms are completed, this world will turn from a minor Kiliacosm into a medium Kiliacosm, or even directly into a great Kiliacosm. When higher realms appear, these guys who cut off their own great Tao will all become stepping stones for the experts of the new era. In the three realms, the Heavenly Court was ruled by the Heavenly Emperor, and the Human King was ruled by the Human King. This king pointed his sword to the Netherworld, and was bound to become an existence like Tao. In the Netherworld, there are 9 sages, and each of the 6 Tao masters leads one. At the time when the world is about to be completed, since there is a natural Azura, then the Azura Tao of the 6 Tao should be controlled by you. Lin Yuan's gaze was indifferent, and he said in a deep voice, "This is the will of the heavens martial world that chose you. Of course, this king can kill you again, and make the position of Azura Tao master empty. However, this is meaningless. This king doesn't care about a mere sage's great Tao master." Zhou Zhenxian looked at Lin Yuan in a daze, and his 1,000 eyes were filled with a blank expression. There was no other way. What Lin Yuan said could be said to be the top secret even among the Guardian of the Heaven's Gate. Not everyone was qualified to know about it, especially when it came to the myriad heavens and realms. The natives of the heavens martial world might have some guesses. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many amazing people who left this world. However, those who had the courage to step into a wider world didn't come back. The rest of the people didn't know about the myriad heavens and realms, or they didn't have the courage to leave the heavens martial world. So they could only spread the word that the bitter sea outside the Heaven's Gate was an evil place. No matter how powerful the cultivators were, they would be killed by the strange creatures living in the bitter sea. It didn't matter who spread the words, or what their goal was. In fact, it didn't matter anymore. The principle of 3 people becoming a tiger was also applicable here. In these years, the Guardian of the Heaven's Gate had been spreading the word about how bad the environment in the bitter sea was, And how many cultivators who could suppress an era didn't even have a corpse left after stepping into the bitter sea? In any case, the heavens' martial world was only a small world. Those cultivators and demonic beasts who left this world either died or broke through. No matter what the situation was, they wouldn't be able to return to the heavens' martial world. Unless the 3 realms and 6 daos were completed, when this world finished upgrading, there might be some ancient cultivators who crossed over and returned. As time passed, the rumor spread more and more widely. The number of great cultivators and demonic beasts who dared to step out of the Heaven's Gate became fewer and fewer. Thus, this rumor that Lin Yuan knew to be a lie with a single glance actually became the consensus of the cultivators of the Heaven's martial world. However, although Wine Sword Mystery didn't understand what Lin Yuan was talking about, the general meaning was very clear. When the heaven and earth were completed, there would be cultivators who were more powerful than the current experts. They might come from other worlds, or they might be natives of this world. And this Black Jiao was currently planning to enter the Netherworld. The so-called Earth Saint was actually completely ignored by this Black Jiao. The Azura Dao Lord sounded very powerful, but it seemed that he was just a worker under this Black Jiao. Wine Sword Mystery thought for a moment, and the Azura King's celestial body slowly dissipated, revealing his normal appearance once again. He said in a deep voice, "Then what do I need to pay? Is it just to submit to you?" "That's right." Lin Yuan nodded slightly, and a hint of joy flashed past his eyes. Just like what he said, the natural Azura should be the Azura Dao Lord. This was not his choice, but the choice of the world will. Now was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. Even if Lin Yuan cultivated the all-life scripture, he couldn't casually kill Wine Sword Mystery and plot to become the Azura Dao Lord. But this didn't mean that Lin Yuan could only be a bystander, so he chose to subdue Wine Sword Mystery. More importantly, the so-called method to become a saint was just the all-life scripture. In the future, when Wine Sword Mystery became a saint, it would be because of the support of the power of the earth, which would not be inferior to a saint's battle prowess. In addition, his primordial spirit was entrusted to the Netherworld, which could be considered as a kind of immortal. It didn't matter what method he cultivated. Chapter 1033. But if Wine Sword Mystery practiced the all-living scripture. Although the all-living scripture was not the kind of overbearing cultivation method that would put one's life and death in the hands of the one who practiced it, there would still be a connection between the two. Even if Wine Sword Mystery became a saint of the earth, his every move could not be hidden from his eyes. Just like after Lei Fan practiced the all-living scripture, although he also gained some benefits, it also allowed Lin Yuan to see the purpose of the outer god behind the scenes. The outer god even plotted against him and almost killed him directly. Although the outer god kept his life, after cutting off most of his primordial spirit, he would definitely not be able to stir up trouble in a short time. Lin Yuan had been in this world for almost 3 years, and the alien monster probably had been there for about the same time, or maybe even longer. After all, as a creature of the Tongtian realm, it was normal for him to come and obey the orders of the incarnation of the Tongtian sect. However, when Lin Yuan's series of punches landed on the opponent's body, it almost instantly turned his plans of several years into nothing. The hesitation in Wine Sword Mystery's eyes disappeared, and he strode forward to Lin Yuan. A golden light flew out from Lin Yuan's forehead and went straight into Wine Sword Mystery's glabella. After a while, Wine Sword Mystery's face flashed with joy, and he cupped his fists and said, "Senior, thank you for the cultivation method." As the most heaven-defying cultivation method that Lin Yuan knew, the all-living scripture was invisible, but it could evolve all living things. Even if Azura, who could not practice it and could only rely on killing to strengthen himself, got the all-living scripture, he could still get a lot of benefits from it. Simply put, Wine Sword Mystery could obtain cultivation after killing, but this kind of cultivation method also had a very strong side effect. If he killed too many people at once, under the impact of the terrifying killing intent, he would easily lose himself, lose his intelligence and become a monster. Even the Azura was very afraid of this. But according to the method of the all-living scripture to deal with the killing energy, not only the efficiency of the improvement was higher, but also the horrible killing intent did not need to be feared. Not to mention how noble the Dao seat of an Earth Saint was. Just the practicality of this technique made Wine Sword Profound feel that he had profited greatly. As Wine Sword Mystery and Lin Yuan reached a consensus, the willow branches in the sky slowly fell down, and the barrier that isolated the heaven and earth disappeared. However, this time, There were no curious gazes from other directions. After all, every time something appeared around Lin Yuan, it was beyond their understanding, and it was more and more terrifying. Especially this time, it was even to the extent of isolating the heaven and earth. If the one who attacked this time had the same temper as the one from the endless sea, he would have died on the spot with just a glance. The willow branch did not act as Lin Yuan had expected. Instead, it slowly descended in front of Lin Yuan. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the approval of the Patriarch of Yangmei. You have received the supreme treasure, the willow branch. Name, willow branch. Type, Connate magic treasure. Grade, position. Special feature, space locking. Locked space. The host can infuse the willow branch with demonic power and designate an area to be isolated. Before the host's demonic power is exhausted or the isolated area is removed, the isolated area cannot be exited or entered. Lin Yuan, admiring. As expected of an ultimate big shot who had become a primordial chaos big shot. Any willow branch from his body could be regarded as an existence like a magic treasure. Who knew how huge the Patriarch of Yangmei, who had lived for countless years, would be if he revealed his original form, and how many willow branches he had. The use of this willow branch was not small. Whether it was manually encircling an arena like the Patriarch of Yangmei, making both sides unable to leave, or using this treasure unilaterally to trap the enemy, it was very convenient. The only flaw was that Lin Yuan's own strength was not considered top-notch. If the Patriarch of Yangmei personally used the willow branch, he would not need to deliberately infuse much magic power to directly trap and kill any native of the Sky Martial world. However, if Lin Yuan used this treasure, even if the opponent was only a desolate demon realm or a void netherworld realm existence, it would not take long for the opponent to exhaust the demonic power of the willow branch and escape. After swallowing the willow branch into his stomach, Lin Yuan wrapped it with a gentle demonic power and slowly refined it. The magic treasures in the untainted world, whether they were artificially refined or natural treasures, would be imprinted with inhibitions. Even if an outsider seized the treasure, he or she would have to refine these inhibitions slowly. It was not that the magic treasures could not be used before they were completely refined, but the more inhibitions one refined, the greater the power of the magic treasures could be improved. Moreover, if the inhibitions were not completely refined, the person who set these inhibitions could sense the existence of the magic treasures at any time, and could even call the magic treasures back to his or her side within a certain range. It was not completely unreasonable to place the word kill in front of killing people to steal treasures. Although this willow branch was given to him by the Patriarch of Yangmei, there were still 49 restrictions on it. Lin Yuan would have to refine at least 30 restrictions before he could barely use this treasure, and at most, he would only be able to use 40% of its power. No, for this type of treasure its power was actually fixed. This was the power of the laws of space. Once it was used, unless the owner of the treasure took the initiative to remove it or the demonic power was exhausted, there was no third way to remove it. The 40% of power meant that Lin Yuan's consumption of demonic power had increased by 60%. When will I be able to reach the level of the Patriarch of Yangmei? Lin Yuan shook his head with a chuckle and muttered to himself. The congenital creatures of the Eldritch world were extremely powerful, but there were still differences in strength between species. With the power of the system, Lin Yuan could even break through to the level of a real dragon or even higher, which was the legendary level of the ancestral dragon. If Lin Yuan had the foundation of the Patriarch of Yangmei at that time, every time he molted, he would leave behind the most precious dragon scales that countless cultivators would scramble for. Any one of them would be a good material for refining top magic treasures. Well, it seemed a little inauspicious to think like this. Just like in the games in his previous life, there should not be any monsters that wanted their materials to be more valuable, right? After all, greed was a common disease of intelligent creatures. If they had something coveted, they would have to be cautious even if their cultivation was very high. This king's subordinates have already arranged a large array outside this woodland. Once this king leaves this place, the array will be activated. At that time, everything here will turn into ashes. You can't stay here anymore. You will enter the Hengduan Mountains with this king, or you will stay alone in the northern frontier to gain experience. When this side of the world is completed, this king will summon you again. Lin Yuan turned his head and focused his attention on the wine sword mystery again, and asked with cold eyes. Chapter 1034. No matter how high an Azura's intelligence was, it was still an Azura. It could not suppress its desire to fight, so allowing the Wine Sword Mystic to move freely was tantamount to burying a huge hidden danger in the northern frontier. Who knew where this guy would go after leaving the Hungry Ghost Forest, who he would kill, and how many people he would kill in the end? At the same time, these words were also Lin Yuan's probing. Although the two sides had established a connection because of the all-living scripture, this was not enough for Lin Yuan to completely trust him. If the Wine Sword Mystic saw that the magic treasure had been taken away and planned to find an excuse to run away, Lin Yuan would not do anything that would give him a headache. He could directly remove the system's concealment of the all-living scripture and let the world will deal with this Azura. The Wine Sword Mystic pondered for a moment, and a touch of hesitation flashed across his eyes. However, very quickly, his expression became serious, and he said in a deep voice, "Since I have memories, I have been wandering in this forest. Every time I want to leave, there will be a voice in the depths of my heart reminding me that I must eradicate all the hidden dangers in this forest. Otherwise, I absolutely cannot leave this place. No matter how hard I try, my body does not listen to me, and I cannot leave this place at all. If Senior wants to flatten this place, perhaps it is time for me to leave." Speaking up to this point, he stretched out his hand to touch his nose and smiled bitterly. "I've always been unwilling to be bound here, but when it's time to leave, I don't know where to go. I hope that Senior will be merciful and allow me to follow Senior." The strong obsession from the Wine Sword Mystic when he was alive was not something that this natural Azura could ignore. Just like Lin Yuan clearly had the strength of the 8th level of the Desolate Demon Realm, when he possessed Guan Zhaoshan's body, he had to honestly complete the last wish left by Guan Zhaoshan. This was not because mortals had the ability to restrain desolate demons, but because the so-called god's descent was a kind of contract. What bound Lin Yuan to complete those things was not Guan Zhaoshan's will, but the omnipresent power of the rules. The relationship between the innate Azura and the Wine Sword Mystery was similar to this kind of contract. Innate Azura was born with the help of Wine Sword Xian's corpse. Although he didn't inherit everything of Wine Sword Xian, he had indeed succeeded in descending. But he also had to pay a price. Before completing Wine Sword Xian's obsession, he could only be active in this forest and was not allowed to take half a step out. But even though he was also working hard to hunt hungry ghosts, although these undying people didn't have high intelligence, their vigilance and intuition were even more terrifying. Ordinary wild beasts knew how to avoid powerful predators, but these hungry ghosts naturally avoided innate Azura like a tiger. In addition, the area of the starved ghost forest was not small, so his harvest was not big, and it was far from enough to complete the Liquor Sword mysterious obsession. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. His figure flashed and appeared directly in front of Wine Sword Xian. He swung his tail that was like the tip of a spear and directly pointed at the center of Wine Sword Xian's eyebrows. Immediately, a translucent figure was suddenly hit out from Wine Sword Xian's body. After shaking for a while, the figure obviously faded a lot. It took a long time for it to condense into a human form again. It was the appearance of Wine Sword Xian when he was alive. "Greetings to the Dragon King." Spirit Body Wine Sword Xian cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan. There was some sadness in his eyes. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "Although this king does not know what you did, but according to the rules of the Netherworld, you used your own soul as a sacrifice to summon such an Azura. No matter if he was born from this world or you summoned him from another world to the Sky Martial world, there is no difference. When he completes your obsession, your soul will completely dissipate. So can you tell this king, why did you?" Before Lin Yuan finished his words, Spirit Body Wine Sword Xian laughed bitterly, interrupted Lin Yuan's question, and said, "Dragon King, in this life of mine, it can be said that there are many ups and downs. I was born in the royal family, and from the moment I opened my eyes, I stood at a position that most people in this world could not reach in their entire lives. In addition, my talent for cultivation was not bad, but because of the rules set by the gate of heaven, my father cut off my chance to inherit the throne, but he also hired the best teacher for me, gave me the most resources for cultivation, and gave me a large piece of land. That was how I got the title of Sword King." Pausing, he sighed and laughed bitterly. "But after the border was tight, Lei Qiuxing took the opportunity to rebel, and my brother did not even have the ability to hold on until General Yan, who was still in the Frost Mirror grassland, came back. Thus, the title of Sword King became a joke again. In the eyes of others, I was just a remnant of the previous dynasty with a slightly higher cultivation. After living in seclusion for so many years, I only knew one thing, that the so-called teachers and students, friends were all unreliable, and the only people who stood by your side in the end would be your family. Just like that year, my father could not bear to cut off my path of cultivation, and my brother would rather die in the battle in the imperial city than send an imperial edict for me and the other vassal kings to go to the capital to save the emperor, so as to avoid being caught by Lei Qiusheng. After that, I lived in seclusion, and went into exile. If it was not for the help of the Zhao clan, I would have died long ago. Lin Yuan and the innate Azura were silent, listening to Wine Sword Xian speak indifferently. After all, this was the last time the other party spoke in this world. Back then in the various regions of the Wanjian dynasty, the people of the Zhao clan either lived in seclusion, or were massacred, or were exiled to the northern frontier. Even some of the people of the Zhao clan that I had never seen or heard of, just because my surname was Zhao, they were willing to lend me a helping hand, and never abandoned me. On the contrary, I have been running away for so many years. Those people of the Wanjian dynasty, although they claimed that they were willing to support the Wanjian dynasty, but I was very clear that they were not really loyal to the Zhao clan. Perhaps it was because of their ambition, and they wanted to improve their status and the status of their families, or perhaps it was because of their dissatisfaction, and they were worried that after a period of time, Lei Qiusheng would act against them and their families. Or perhaps it was because of some other reason. But the irony was that this group of people who claimed to be loyal to the Zhao clan had never once lent a helping hand to us. Those people who were brothers of the Zhao clan, when they saw us, avoided us like we were the plague. I had to admit that Lei Qiusheng had indeed left an indelible psychological shadow in my heart. After my brother was exiled to the Hengduan Mountains, I was the person with the highest status in the Zhao clan. But after my injuries gradually healed, I secretly left the Zhao clan, and became a wandering demon slayer in the northern frontier. When the Wanjian dynasty was destroyed, I ran away from the responsibility that I should have shouldered. So this time, I do not want to run away anymore. Wine Sword Xian turned his gaze to the innate Azura, and said with a smile, Wine Sword Xian, Sword King, whether you exist or not is not important. I only hope that the Dragon King can sympathize with my choice, and leave a way out for my Zhao clan bloodline. Chapter 1035. Lin Yuan's eyes slightly turned. After remaining silent for a while, he took the initiative to say, You know how this king does things. The northern frontier has its own rules, and this king has never asked for anything. The rules of the northern frontier are only the minimum requirements. I just hope that the creatures in the northern frontier can have a bottom line. As for the northern frontier, if you want to sit in a high position, it depends on your own abilities. This king doesn't ask about your background, your past, or your purpose. As long as you do something that is beneficial to the northern frontier, this king will not be stingy with rewards. Except for the sects that shouldn't exist, even for the aristocratic families, this king has chosen to let them go more than once. As long as they don't cross the line, even if they have some little tricks, this king can pretend that he doesn't see it. But, Lord Dragon King. Wine Sword Xian suddenly bowed to Lin Yuan and said loudly, There aren't many Zhou family bloodline left. In another 10 years, dozens of years except for the ones in the northern frontier, the Zhou family bloodline in the other places that have changed their names will no longer exist. We are very weak, and can only stay together for warmth. Some people don't even know what they are doing. They just try their best to fulfill the requirements given by their superiors. Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes, snorted and said, Whether they know what they are doing or not, it has nothing to do with this king. This king only knows that they have betrayed the northern frontier, betrayed this king. If this king hadn't noticed it, and had been taken advantage of by them at this moment, do you think that Zhou Wuying, or the guy behind Zhou Wuying, would let those people who are loyal to this king live? Wine Sword Xian opened his mouth. But before he could say anything, Lin Yuan's cold voice sounded again. Traitors should have the consequences of being traitors. No matter how much you have contributed to the northern frontier, this king won't agree to your request. This is this king's only bottom line. And, this gap can't be opened at this time. Otherwise, the entire northern frontier will fall apart. You know what I mean, don't you? Jiao Zhenxian closed his eyes in pain and sighed helplessly. Lin Yuan looked at Wine Sword Xian expressionlessly and said indifferently, But this king should be fair in his actions. In order to curb the undead in the hungry ghost forest, you did not hesitate to sacrifice your soul. This is a meritorious deed for the northern frontier. In addition, you exchanged for a natural Azura, which will also be a meritorious deed for the netherworld in the future. So, this king will protect your true soul. When you enter the reincarnation cycle again, forget the past and start over again. As soon as his voice fell, the incense power on Lin Yuan's attribute panel jumped wildly, and nearly 100 million incense power was directly deducted. Specks of golden light overflowed from Lin Yuan's body and wrapped around Wine Sword Xian's spiritual body, sending him into the reincarnation cycle. At this time, Lin Yuan casually swung his dragon tail and looked at the natural Azura and said indifferently, "I have sent him into the reincarnation cycle. The karma between you two has been cleared. From today onwards, he is he, and you are you. However, you have just awakened your spiritual wisdom and are inexperienced in the world. Since you are determined to follow this king, then this king will bestow you a new name. After all, you don't want to live as someone else, right? Senior, please bestow a new name." The natural Azura cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan, and his face revealed an expression of relief. "You are the destined Azura Pathmaster, and are destined to be this king's right-hand man. In addition, you and I are connected by fate, so you will follow my surname Lin. Moreover, you are a natural Azura, and the first Azura in the Sky Martial world. Therefore, there should be a Yuan in your name. Azuras fight all their lives and rely on killing to grow, so I will bestow a 2 on you. From today onwards, you will be called Lin Yuan 2. As soon as Lin Yuan's voice fell, his figure had already turned into a black light and swept towards the Hengduan mountain range. Lin Yuan 2, Lin Yuan 2. Ha 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 ha, my name is Lin Yuan 2. Senior, please wait, I'm coming. Lin Yuan 2 repeated his new name several times, and the more he repeated it, the more satisfied he was. After laughing loudly, he turned into a bloody light and followed Lin Yuan into the Hengduan mountain range. At the same time, outside the gate of heaven, a handsome young monk dressed in a grey robe slowly opened his eyes. There was a faint golden light flowing in his eyes, and the skin that was exposed outside of his robe was as white as jade. He looked like a perfect sculpture that had been exquisitely carved. This world, mending, netherworld, Azura. As if he had not spoken for a long time, the monk had to pause every 2 words. At the same time, his golden eyes revealed a look of doubt. After a moment, the monk put his palms together and softly chanted a Buddha's name. He said indifferently, "Amitabha, guarding the gate of heaven for 300 years has been like a day. Today I know that there is a sky beyond the sky. In vain, we thought that we stood proudly in the world, but we are just a group of frogs at the bottom of a well. Haha, a sky beyond the sky. This little monk thanks Benefactor Lin for clearing my doubts." As soon as he finished speaking, the monk sat down cross-legged in the void. The top cultivators who had also come to guard the gate of heaven widened their eyes and looked at the statue-like monk in disbelief. This monk was not famous in the Qianwu world, but he was a mighty figure from 7,000 years ago. He was the main character of that era, and could be said to have suppressed an era by himself. Now, the inheritance of Buddhism in the Qianwu world was more or less related to this monk. At the same time, even among the guards of the Gate of Heaven, he was an absolute powerhouse. Who knew how many guards of the Gate of Heaven would travel thousands of miles just to ask for a word or two from this monk? However, this monk had been practicing silent meditation for 3,000 years. He had not spoken a word for 3,000 years, and had not taken half a step out of the Gate of Heaven. If it were not for the faint fluctuations of life on his body, they would have thought that this monk had passed away, leaving behind a statue-like body to guard the Gate of Heaven. What the hell was? This monk had just spoken. Mending this world? What was the netherworld Azura? Moreover, with the monk's cultivation, if there was anyone who had the most hope of attaining immortality, he was definitely one of them. However, this monk actually called himself a frog at the bottom of a well. Who was this Benefactor Lin? How could he solve this monk's doubts? Is Great Master? A guard of the Gate of Heaven from 1,500 years ago, had a look of hesitation on his face. Then, he pointed at his own head, as if he wanted to say that this monk had been sitting here for a few years and had completely gone crazy. However, due to the monk's cultivation, he did not dare to say it out loud. This little monk is very good. Better than ever. The monk who had not spoken to them for thousands of years suddenly turned his head and took the initiative to speak. If everyone wants to continue wasting time here, please do so. However, this little monk has found his own path and will take his leave first. If fate allows, we will meet again in the future. Chapter 1036. The group of Heaven Gate guardians looked at the monk with their mouths agape. The monk took a step forward and entered the crack of the Heaven Gate. He walked into the sea of bitterness that had been regarded as a forbidden zone by the cultivators of the Heaven Martial World for thousands of years. Among the stunned natives of the Heaven Martial World, there was a red-clothed youth who looked indifferent. It was as if he was not surprised by the monk's actions at all. "I thought that you still haven't seen through this game of chess clearly until now. It turns out that you were just drawing a bow without releasing it and secretly placing a piece. As expected of an existence that even the heavenly Tao thinks highly of. This scheming and shrewdness is probably not inferior to that person in the early years. However, it's not up to a junior like you to interfere in what I want to do. You want to scheme against the netherworld and become a saint? Ha! So what if you really become a saint? When this world is repaired, there will be time for you to cry. I want to see how much strength you have left to fight with me at that time. If not for the fact that you are still useful, I would have already killed you. Do you really think that I am afraid of Yang Mei?" A playful smile appeared on the red-clothed youth's handsome face. He was secretly planning his follow-up plan. The red-clothed youth was the youth incarnation of the Tong Tian sect leader. He used the name Song to sneak into the Heaven Gate Guardians. He had been in hiding for many years in order to plan the secret of the Heaven Martial World. Even the disappearance of the Demon Court and the rise of the Heaven Gate Guardians were his secret plans. His goal was to gather the experts of the Heaven Martial World and use various methods to borrow their strength to find the secret for himself. However, after many years of fruitless results, he was certain that the secret that could kill Hong Jun had not been fully matured. It would only appear along with a major event that could shake the entire Heaven Martial World. In other words, as long as the Heaven Martial World was not repaired, the secret would not be revealed. Now that Lin Yuan had been chosen as the Nether King by the will of the world, he naturally took on the task of repairing the three realms. If not for that, he would have already killed Lin Yuan, this threat. As for the fact that they were all comrades who fought against Hong Jun, in the mortal world, loyal officials might not even be friends with each other, let alone in the crueler world of cultivation. Moreover, looking at the history of the whole untainted world, it was not difficult to see that Sanqing had his own characteristics. For example, the Grand Elder had always acted like a good man, mediating the conflict between Tong Tian and Yuanshi. However, he was more scheming than anyone else. Even Haotian Emperor was set up by the Grand Elder, let alone other existences who were enemies of the Grand Elder. Then there was Yuanshi. To be honest, Yuanshi could be said to be the one with the least evil intentions among the Sanqing. It was just that he had a carefree personality and could not tolerate any sand in his eyes. Otherwise, the Jie sect and the Chan sect would not have been in such a deadlock, and the 12 golden immortals of the Chan sect would not have fallen apart. In addition, Yuanshi was very prideful and could not stand being provoked by others. This created an image that looked like a villain. Tong Tian had nothing to say about himself. As the only existence in the whole untainted world who had tricked Hong Jun, his scheming was naturally not ordinary. However, putting this point aside, Tong Tian could be said to be extremely protective of his disciples. He even did not hesitate to fall out with the other two Sanqing for his own disciples. Although it was a big show for Hong Jun, it was also to ensure that the disciples of the Jie sect would not be destroyed because of his escape. Therefore, protecting his disciples was never an act. The opportunity to kill Hong Jun and free his two brothers was right in front of him. How could he give it up to Lin Yuan? This was also a common problem among intelligent creatures. Most of the problems were on others, and there was absolutely no problem with oneself. For example, when some people played games, they always felt that their teammates were too weak and too trashy, and did not reflect on why they were matched with such weak teammates. This example was just right for Tong Tian and Lin Yuan, because Tong Tian felt that if he got the treasure that could kill Hong Jun, he would definitely win. On the other hand, if Lin Yuan got the treasure, it meant that he had missed the best opportunity to kill Hong Jun. However, this pool of muddy water is a bit too muddy. Tong Tian squinted his eyes slightly and thought to himself, Lin Yuan and Taoist Hong Yun are only opponents on the surface. It is still unknown whether there are other existences who are also looking for secrets behind them. If the three realms are completed, it will be difficult for my original body to descend. I'm afraid this matter will be difficult. After all, the ancestor of Yang Mei was guarding outside the gate of heaven. This news could be hidden from others, but it could not be hidden from Tong Tian. If the ancestor of Yang Mei was not outside the gate of heaven at this moment, he would have thought of a way to contact his original body. If he could not get the help of the other two incarnations, he would not have to worry about the schemes of those guys hiding in the dark. In fact, Yang Mei's attitude had always been a mystery. As a powerful figure who had existed for a very long time since the creation of the world by the great Pan Gu, if she was willing, it would not be Hongjuan's turn to integrate with the way of heaven. After that, there was no conflict between Yang Mei and Hongjun. Even Hongjun was tolerant of Yang Mei. However, Yang Mei suddenly seemed to be a different person. She actually wanted to change the timeline, reverse the past and the future, and beat Hongjun from integrating with the way of heaven into the mortal world. It seemed that no one had gained an advantage in the battle in the River of Time, but Yang Mei was indeed forced to leave the untainted world, and Hongjun did not want to hear the name of a powerful figure like Yang Mei again in the untainted world. Even in the untainted world, no one could understand what this powerful figure was thinking and doing. Perhaps even Hongjun himself did not know why Yang Mei suddenly turned hostile. However, one thing was certain. Although the original body of Tong Tian was not the same as before, it could still be said that he would definitely die if he faced an opponent like Yang Mei in the Sea of Bitterness. Lin Yuan's timing was indeed excellent. Even if he used all his means, he could not contact the original body under the nose of Yang Mei. Moreover, Lin Yuan had clearly killed 2 fox demons under Yang Mei's command, but Yang Mei was not angry. Instead, she broke off a willow branch from her body and gave it to Lin Yuan as a magic weapon. From this, it could be seen that Yang Mei's attitude towards this black Jiao was still mainly friendly. If necessary, Yang Mei was afraid that she would personally fight for that secret. I hope there are still variables. Tong Tian sighed softly in his heart, shook his head, and turned back into the crowd. Hengduan Mountains, near the Stone Claw Jungle. Chapter 1037. Hengduan Mountain Range, near the Stonedelan Forest. Li Zhongxing was riding a warhorse with the bloodline of a demon beast. His right hand gripped the hilt of the sword at his waist tightly. His gaze was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. This time, Lin Yuan had entered the Hengduan Mountain Range. It could be said that he had mobilized all the forces that could be mobilized from the northern frontier. Such an action was tantamount to taking a huge gamble. He was betting that after the mastermind behind the scenes was severely injured, everything in the northern frontier would be stabilized. Even those aristocratic families would not cause any trouble at this time. Of course, if the aristocratic families in the northern frontier rebelled, the northern frontier could easily suppress them. After all, at this time in the northern frontier, if the aristocratic families started to become stronger, it was equivalent to becoming a fat piece of meat in the eyes of the embroidered uniform guards and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, not only did they not want to improve, but they also regarded being weak as an honor. If these guys who were scared out of their wits rebelled without external help, that would be a truly unforeseeable thing. However, after mobilizing almost half of the forces in the northern frontier, there was naturally no problem in traversing the demon beast forest. After all, low-level demon beasts and wild beasts were simply unable to threaten this huge army. Even if there were a few hungry low-level beasts that tried to rob the supplies, they were now roasted meat on the campfire in the camp. In fact, so far, the situation was not bad. However, for some reason, Li Zhongxing always had a feeling of unease. It was as if in the forest that he could not see, there were countless hungry predators that had already prepared a trap and were waiting for them to deliver themselves to their doorstep. Am I overthinking? Li Zhongxing laughed involuntarily and shook his head. After all, the Hengduan mountain range had resisted the power of the northern frontier for a day or two. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce could pass through normally, but as long as someone was related to a certain government office in the northern frontier, once they entered the Hengduan mountain range, they would end up disappearing without a trace. However, the problem was, did the other party really have the ability to take down such a huge army? If the other party had such an ability, why would they still stir up trouble in the Hengduan mountains? If they directly attacked the northern frontier might not be able to withstand it. Li Zhongxing tried to comfort himself. However, the uneasiness in his heart still lingered. Li Zhongxing took a deep breath and reached out to summon his personal guards. He said in a deep voice, "Although we are almost at Dragon King's territory, we cannot let down our guard. Although the army is not tired from the long journey, the supply lines are very long. If there is a problem with the supply lines, our entire army will be destroyed. Therefore, pass down this order. The army will set up camp here and send someone to the rear to urge the supply lines. We will continue our journey tomorrow morning. Here. The bodyguard cupped his hands in acknowledgement. Li Zhongxing narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, "There is one more thing. This general has always felt a little uneasy. When the army sets up camp, send out all the scouts and have them report back every half an incense stick's worth of time. This general will grasp all the nearby information in real time." "This?" The bodyguard was slightly startled and said with a strange expression, "Haven't the scouts been sent out?" According to the rehearsal plan, as long as the army starts to slow down, all the scouts will leave the army to explore the nearby situation so that the rear can determine where to go next. Could it be? Li Zhongxing's expression changed. There was indeed such a thing during the rehearsal. However, he was too anxious at the moment and almost forgot about it. He finally knew why he had been feeling uneasy all this time. It had been almost 2 hours since the army slowed down. Not a single scout had returned to the camp to report the situation. Moreover, this was not the main point. The main point was that Lin Yuan was clearly equipped with the communication system. He could communicate with them with a thought. Even if something unexpected happened, those scouts should have contacted them long ago. However, it was silent. It was as if there were no scouts in their army at all. It also meant that the scouts that were separated from the main army were all in trouble. And the enemy acted so fast that the scouts didn't even have the time to send out the most basic warning. They just disappeared directly, just like the spies that were sent to the Hengduan mountain. If there was really an enemy, how strong must he be to be able to wipe out all the scouts in an instant? Each scout team was made up of 12 people. One of them was Yi Bus Ho, 2 were genie guards, and 3 were members of the Association of the Demon Emperor. In other words, they were wandering warriors and demon slayers. Anyway, they were all cultivators who made a living near the Hengduan mountain. The rest were elite soldiers trained by the Northern Battlefront Army. Regardless of cultivation, such a team should be able to deal with all kinds of unexpected situations. How could they disappear directly without even sending out a warning? After calling several times through the communication system, Li Zhongxing finally swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Through the communication system he ordered the army again. "Everyone, stop moving forward." So far, the scouts we sent out are still missing. This is undoubtedly an ambush that the enemy has planned for us. Therefore, we are now surrounded by the enemy. Set up camp and prepare for defense. Everyone, brace yourselves and get ready for battle at any time. If only 1 or 2 scout teams had gone missing, Li Zhongxing could say that they were unlucky to have run into high-level demon beasts that wandered to the periphery of the Hengduan mountain for some reason. But all the scouts had gone missing inexplicably, which meant that the enemy had already known that the army of the Northern Battlefront was going to enter the Hengduan mountain. And they had set up an ambush at the place where they had to pass, waiting for them to come in. So now, the battle could break out at any time. Although directly saying it would affect the morale, if he chose not to say it and they were suddenly ambushed, it would not be as simple as low morale. It would not be impossible for the whole army to collapse. After all, not all generals had the ability to command a super large army in battle, even if they had the communication system. After all, there was a limit to the calculation of the human brain. Without a certain talent, a battle of this scale could not be handled by one person. The guard pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, "General Li, in fact, I think the most important thing now is not to set up camp, but to find out who is surrounding us. Is it a demon beast or a human? After all, if the enemy has the strength to fight us head-on, why didn't they launch a surprise attack before we could react?" Chapter 1038. Beads of cold sweat the size of soybeans slowly seeped out of Li Zhongxing's forehead. He felt that his career had ushered in a huge challenge. At this time, there were not many choices in front of him. For example, he could set up camp here and wait for the Dragon King to come, then bear the infamy of dereliction of duty and incompetence. For example, he could continue to probe forward and see what kind of existence deliberately came here to ambush them. Although the former was safe, making such a decision was tantamount to letting Li Zhongxing label himself as incompetent. When the time came, he might not even be able to keep the military power of the southern expedition. The latter seemed feasible. After all, what the bodyguard said was reasonable. If the enemy had the strength to directly clash with their army, they might have taken advantage of the darkness to catch them off guard and even directly cause their army to collapse. But one could not lie to oneself. Just like everything had two sides, one could not only believe in the side that was beneficial to oneself. The former would certainly be scolded and reprimanded, but it was still a decision that a general should make. When the number and strength of the enemy were unknown, not choosing to take risks and instead preserving the integrity of the army was definitely not wrong for the overall situation. The latter seemed feasible, but one had to consider that it was not that the enemy did not have the strength to clash head-on with the army, but that they were not willing to do that kind of bloody battle. Instead, they deliberately showed weakness to provoke them, constantly dividing and devouring the small groups that were separated from the army to investigate the situation, achieving the goal of obtaining the greatest results with the least losses. Li Zhongxing narrowed his eyes slightly, thought for a moment, and then said in the command system, "The enemy's origin is unknown. I plan to personally lead the guards to investigate. From now on, I will transfer full command to the strategic command in the rear. All staff, prepare to connect with the strategic command. Be sure to let the rear know of the situation here as soon as possible so that they can make arrangements. If I also go and do not return, do not act rashly. Set up camp here and wait for the Dragon King to arrive, and the trouble will naturally be solved." After thinking about it again and again, Li Zhongxing still made a decision. It had to be said that the decision was very moderate. Allowing the army to continue setting up camp and building fortifications while waiting for reinforcements from the rear, while he led the elite guards into an unknown region to take the initiative to engage the enemy. In fact, if not for the existence of the communication system, such an order would definitely be extremely foolish. As the saying goes, the general is the soldier's guts. An outstanding general, even if he had the courage to fight 10,000 men, would still stay in the middle of the army. After all, if anything were to happen to the general, nearly 90% of the soldiers under his command would directly lose their will to fight. At the same time, what would usher in would be a tragic defeat. Therefore, usually in war, the act of killing the general and seizing the flag was also a direct way to obtain victory. When Li Zhongxing's voice fell, Lin Yuan, who was hurrying towards the army, paused slightly. The blue-white vertical pupils narrowed slightly, and the demonic power was consumed. The range of the Eye of God expanded rapidly. Except for some areas that were seriously disturbed by special forces, the images of the peripheral areas bordering the Hengduan Mountains and the northern frontier were all presented in Lin Yuan's mind. Interesting. Lin Yuan stared coldly at the area where the northern frontier army was and said in a cold voice, "I originally thought that only the Shuangjian dynasty would be eyeing us covetously. I didn't expect that it would be the Chuyun dynasty's army that appeared here to ambush the northern frontier army. Does this mean that the demon venerable in the southern wilderness can't sit still anymore?" The ones surrounding the northern frontier army were not demonic beasts or rogue cultivators. Instead, they were all soldiers with murderous intent and wearing standard equipment. Moreover, all of them were wearing armor made of demonic beast leather. Although the weapons in their hands were also standard, they were basically treasures. At the very least, they were entry-level treasures with the sharpness effect. Such an army was probably the most elite army of the Chuyun dynasty. Although Lin Yuan didn't have an encyclopedia of demonic beasts, he still knew some of the more powerful demonic beasts. The main material of the armor that the soldiers were wearing was a demonic beast called the Thunder Marsh Bull. Although it was far from the bloodline of divine beasts like the Dragon Tribe and the Kirin Tribe, in the Tianwu world, it was definitely not inferior to demonic beasts like the Fox Tribe and the Ape Tribe. Normally, they lived in swamps and were born with the demonic power of the lightning attribute. Once the tribe reached a certain size, the swamps that they lived in would directly become areas covered by thunderclouds all year round. Even Heaven's Star Realm cultivators wouldn't dare to enter such a thunder marsh. The armor made of the Thunder Marsh Bull's leather probably weighs more than 500 kilograms. These soldiers are all wearing 6 to 8 sets of leather armor when they fight. Therefore, they are basically all Heaven's Star Realm cultivators. These people should be the legendary Chuyun dynasty's soldiers, right? In order to deal a heavy blow to the northern frontier before it matures, the Chuyun dynasty has really put in a lot of effort. Didn't they think that if these soldiers were all trapped in the Hengduan mountain range, the Chuyun dynasty wouldn't be able to withstand the fury of the northern frontier? Lin Yuan's gaze was cold as he spoke slowly. The Chuyun dynasty's soldiers were somewhat similar to the Wei dynasty's soldiers during the Warring States period in his previous life. However, their combat strength was on a completely different level. Back then, the Wei dynasty's soldier selection was terrifying. They were required to wear 3 layers of heavy armor and iron helmets, be able to fire 12 stone crossbows, and carry 50 crossbow bolts on their backs. They were also required to carry a long spear or an iron halberd, have a sharp sword at their waist, carry 3 days' worth of rations, and be able to travel more than 100 miles in half a day. In that era where malnutrition was widespread, such requirements were tantamount to challenging the limits of the human body. However, the Wei dynasty's soldiers didn't fail to live up to such terrifying requirements. During the Wei dynasty's peak, they only had 50,000 Wei dynasty soldiers, but their battle record was equally terrifying. According to the records in Wuxia's Inspirational Scholar, during the Battle of the Yin and Jin dynasties, Wuxia led 50,000 Wei soldiers to fight against the Qin dynasty. They defeated the Qin dynasty's army, which was 10 times their number, and created an extremely rare battle in the entire history of war. It was the same for the Yun dynasty's soldier selection. Not to mention the other equipment and the baggage that they carried with them. Just the 6 sets of Thunder Marsh Bull's leather armor added together already weighed close to 2,500 kilograms. Even a Heaven Star Realm cultivator wouldn't have an easy time wearing such heavy armor in battle. This was especially so for the Yun dynasty. They never had any powerful blacksmiths or array masters. They simply ground the materials from demonic beasts into various materials and directly put them to use. There was no way to ensure the quality and reduce the weight at the same time. Therefore, the number of the Yun dynasty's soldiers was never increased. However, their combat strength was truly terrifying. Chapter 1039. No matter how intense the battle between mortals was, it would only last 3 to 5 minutes. After all, the strength of a human body was limited. If they used all their strength for every action, even the fiercest of fiercest men would be exhausted quickly. However, when cultivators mobilized their aura energy and vital energy to fight, unless there was a huge disparity in strength or one side caught the other off guard, it was normal for a head-on battle to last for 3 days and 3 nights. During the battle, wearing equipment that weighed tens of thousands of kilograms and wearing ordinary clothes that were as light as a feather would naturally consume more energy than wearing equipment that weighed tens of thousands of kilograms. Even a Heaven Star Realm cultivator would be able to gain a certain advantage against the Yun nation's tiger soldiers if they shamelessly tried to stall for time. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to be faster than the Yun nation's tiger soldiers who were wearing the Thunder Marsh Bull armor. This was not a joke. Another factor for the Yun nation's tiger soldiers was to be able to explode with a speed that was more terrifying than a cultivator of the same realm without similar equipment. Of course, the Yun nation's tiger soldiers who could do this basically cultivated some kind of secret technique to be able to explode with such speed for a certain period of time. The price was also obvious. As the strongest army in the Yun nation, the Yun nation's tiger soldiers' service time was especially short. Even after they retired, their lifespan was no different from a mortal's. Therefore, when each dynasty had a trump card army, they would also have a corresponding famous general. For example, Yan Xingqi of the Wanjian dynasty, Lei Qiuxing of the Shenwu dynasty, Zhao Xiang of the Qingjiang dynasty, and the Old Khan of the Shuangjian dynasty. Only the Yun nation's tiger soldiers had never had a famous general. The entire army was more like a cold and ruthless machine that only knew to follow the orders of the Yun nation's royal family. Other than that, no one else had any influence in the eyes of the Yun nation's tiger soldiers. Li Zhongxing, stay where you are and wait for the next order. This king has already investigated the enemies around you. They are the Yun nation's tiger soldiers. Lin Yuan's voice followed closely behind Li Zhongxing and sounded from the communication network. This immediately calmed some restless people down. Li Zhongxing, who had just mounted his horse, narrowed his eyes slightly and said doubtfully, "Yun nation's tiger soldiers? This is really not good news." The Yun dynasty was surrounded by mountains on all sides. They usually built their cities in hills, forests, or basins. However, most of their territory was swamps and miasma forests. The enmity of other dynasties was not important to the Yun dynasty. Their main enemy was the harsh environment. Secondly, they were the demonic beasts that lived in these swamps and miasma forests. The demon Venerable that had seized the southern wilderness of Azure River and bordered the Yun dynasty was also their main enemy. As the Yun dynasty's trump card army, the Yun nation's tiger soldiers weren't weak. However, among the trump cards of the 7 dynasties, they were the least impressive. They weren't as immovable as Shenlin Jun, nor were they as aggressive as the Shueliao Knights. However, they were extremely good at fighting in forests and swamps. Their main advantage was their insidiousness. All kinds of blow darts and poison arrows made in the Yun Nation were not only difficult to detect but also highly toxic. Even a scratch could be fatal. The armor that they wore was made from the leather of the Thunder Marsh Bull, which also contained a special thunder spiritual force. If an external force hit this armor, the armor would quickly reflect the thunder spiritual force as a counterattack. Although this level of thunder spiritual force wasn't fatal, even a heavenly star border realm cultivator would be paralyzed for a moment under this level of thunder spiritual force. A battle between experts only lasted for a moment. When two heavenly star border realm cultivators fought with all their might, if one of them suddenly froze for a moment, the other would take the opportunity to take his life. As someone who originated from Shenlin Jun, Li Zhongxing didn't know the trump cards of the various dynasties like the back of his hand. However, he had also fought with Shenlin Jun before and left behind some records. For example, the Qingjiang Victorious Army and the Frost Mirror Barbarian Army were almost completely understood. The Yun Nation's tiger soldiers that bordered the Qingjiang dynasty were also Shenlin Jun's potential enemies. Naturally, it was impossible for Li Zhongxing not to investigate them. The Black Water Army was almost completely annihilated, and Shenlin Jun was completely annihilated. The Fallen Star Army was stationed at the banks of the Wei River. Now that the northern frontier had entered the Hengduan Mountains, there was no one who could be compared to the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers. Even if there was, they might not be able to clash with the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers in such a mountainous terrain. When he thought of this, Li Zhongxing's head was instantly covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. If the Dragon King hadn't spoken in time, he would have been at the gates of hell by now. Apart from the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers, no one could quietly eliminate the scouts sent from the northern frontier in such a short period of time unless there was an absolute suppression in their realm. Compared to these cultivators who made a living near the Hengduan Mountains all year round, the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers, who shouldered the survival of the dynasty, were obviously more cautious and attentive. They were originally good at assassination, and they were fighting on their home ground. Moreover, they had prepared an ambush before the northern frontier troops arrived. Even if he personally led the troops, he might end up in a similar situation, let alone instantly killing the scouts from the northern frontier. What should we do next? Dragon King, please instruct us. Li Zhongxing swallowed his saliva and asked in the communication channel without caring about his reputation. At this moment, no one in the entire Northern Army's command system laughed at Li Zhongxing. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. The Yun Nation's tiger soldiers had not been established for a day or two. The Qing River dynasty, which relied on the tyrannical navy and the natural barrier of the two rivers, had arrogantly challenged the Xinwu and Yun empires. In the end, Zhao Xiang was first defeated by Lei Qiuxing on the plains and then defeated by the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers in the swamp of the Yun Nation. In the war with the Yun Nation, Zhao Xiang, who was known as the Duke of Victory, didn't even see the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers. First, his scouts were killed, then his supplies were cut off, and he was attacked every night without being able to catch a trace of the enemy. Even Zhao Xiang himself almost died in that war. It was also these two battles that completely destroyed Zhao Xiang's invincible legend, and made the Qing River imperial family realize that Zhao Xiang's invincibility was only in the waters. Therefore, his title was the Duke of Victory, and nothing else. In fact, it is not difficult to achieve 100 victories. It can even be said that it is the basic operation of a famous general. In Lin Yuan's previous life, Wu Qi was immortal. After creating the mighty army of Wei Wuzu, he fought 72 battles, won 64 of them, and solved the rest of the battles in a tie. This is something that can be done by mortals. In this world where cultivators exist, it is naturally easier. Therefore, Zhao Xiang never took pride in the title of Duke of Victory. Instead, he regarded it as a disgrace. Chapter 1040. You don't have to do anything. Just wait. Lin Yuan replied with a teasing look in his eyes. Through the eye of God, he could see that the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers were all gathered in places that were convenient for concealment. Only a small number of them were standing guard while the rest were sleeping. Obviously, they didn't intend to attack the northern frontier troops that had already entered their encirclement. From this, It could be seen that the Yun nation's tiger soldiers were indeed experts in scheming. When the northern frontier troops passed through the monster forest, they had already entered their attack range. However, the Yun nation's tiger soldiers had been in a state of drawing a bow but not attacking. When the northern frontier troops were about to enter the Stoneclaw forest, they suddenly attacked and killed all the scouts sent by Li Zhongxing. On the one hand, they killed all the scouts sent by the enemy and blocked the enemy's eyes and ears. This was a kind of psychological warfare. Nothing could make a commander more agitated than being blind and deaf on the battlefield. It was also because of this reason that they almost caught the big fish, Li Zhongxing. At the same time, their actions were not only to make the northern frontier generals impatient, but also to create psychological pressure on the northern frontier troops. After a while, they would most likely attack the northern frontier supply convoy. They would also deliberately let some people escape and let them run to the camp to report. In this way, not only could they cut off the return route of the northern frontier troops, but they could also further exert pressure on them. If the Yun nation's tiger soldiers really did it, the northern frontier troops would definitely be in a constant state of anxiety and fear that the Yun nation's tiger soldiers would attack them at any time. Late at night, the northern frontier troops would inevitably let down their guard. After all, human nerves were actually like strings. Sometimes they could be very tense, but it didn't mean that they could be so tense all the time. The slightest carelessness could cause them to break. If they were attacked in the middle of the night, the northern frontier troops wouldn't be able to control the timing well. If they were suddenly attacked when they were relaxed, even blowing up the camp would be considered a light punishment. If things went wrong, they might collapse without a fight and become the hidden soldiers of the Yun nation, hunting them down one by one. Although I don't know what consensus you have reached with the southern wasteland demon Venerable, it's obvious that you don't understand the Hengduan mountain range. Do you think that after seeing the demonic beasts of the southern wasteland, the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range are nothing? Lin Yuan observed the gathered Yun tiger soldiers, and a cold glint flashed across his blue and white eyes. The Hengduan mountain range was currently in a special situation. After all, the Beast Master was not even enough for them. Even Lin Yuan, a local demon from the Hengduan mountain range, had been rejected, let alone humans from the Yun Empire. Furthermore, these Yun Empire soldiers had been stationed at the border between the Southern Wilderness and the Yun Empire in recent years to guard against the attack of the Southern Wilderness Demon Venerable. Without the Southern Wilderness Demon Venerable's instructions, how could they possibly come here? If their own demons didn't give them any face, how could they expect the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range to give face to the Southern Wilderness Demon Venerable? Furthermore, these Yun tiger soldiers were obviously too empirical. They even scattered medicinal powder near the campsite to drive away the demonic beasts. However, anyone who had lived around the Hengduan mountain range would know that the medicinal powder used to drive away the demonic beasts wasn't useless. After all, it was made by grinding medicinal herbs that all kinds of demonic beasts hated. Then, according to the medicinal properties, it was mixed together to make various medicinal packets. Under no special circumstances, it could indeed have a certain repelling effect. However, the problem was, the repelling effect was extremely limited. The demonic beasts of the southern wasteland might be afraid of this kind of thing because their bodies contained all kinds of toxins. They weren't afraid of the smell of the medicinal powder, but they would be seriously injured when they got close to the medicinal powder. In serious cases, they might even die. The so-called fighting poison with poison was to mix in other venom to balance the venom in the body. After the southern wasteland demonic beasts came into contact with the medicinal powder, the venom in their bodies might be out of balance and even poison themselves to death. However, in the Hengduan mountain range, yes, the demonic beasts here were indeed poisonous, but overall, there weren't many of them. Most of the demonic beasts living in the Hengduan mountain range relied on their strong physiques and the demonic power that they had painstakingly cultivated to hunt. The poisonous powder used to drive away the demonic beasts wasn't completely ineffective, but don't forget that with so many Yun tiger soldiers gathered together, the smell of their bodies might have long overshadowed the smell of the medicinal powder. In addition, the Yun tiger soldiers planned to launch a night attack tonight. When the two sides fought, there was bound to be a lot of bloody smell. This kind of bloody smell was definitely a fatal temptation to the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range, especially those demonic beasts that had just gained spiritual wisdom and didn't have much experience in the world. Why would they care about the medicinal powder? To give a disgusting example, if a person was walking on the road and saw a cesspool, he would naturally choose to avoid it. However, if this person knew that there was wealth hidden in the cesspool that could last him a lifetime, he would most likely resist the disgust and jump in to retrieve the wealth. Although it was disgusting, how many people could resist the temptation when the treasure was right in front of them? Cultivators were such treasures to demonic beasts. Humans hunted demonic beasts for the various materials and demonic cores condensed from demonic power. On the other hand, demonic beasts liked to eat human cultivators who trespassed into their territory because these cultivators had used large amounts of spiritual items when they were young and had used large amounts of spiritual items to build their foundation. Regardless of whether it was humans or demonic beasts, it was impossible for them to completely absorb the essence of all the spiritual items. After all, not everyone had a cheat like Lin Yuan, so there would definitely be residual spiritual items in their bodies. In the eyes of demonic beasts, such existences were just precious spiritual items that could move around. It was precisely because of this that although the northern frontier was poor, they could still rely on the mountains to make a living. This was because in the eyes of demonic beasts, mortals had no value. If they had the time, they might as well use it to hunt other demonic beasts. When mortals from the northern frontier entered the demonic beast forest, most of them died because they provoked some spirit awakening realm demonic beasts or were lucky enough to pick some precious spiritual items. Otherwise, only wild beasts would want to eat mortals. Under the circumstances, one had to pick the best food to eat, right? It was uncertain how many soldiers there were from the Yun nation, but Lin Yuan roughly estimated that there were no less than 30,000 of them. For an ace troop like them, whether it was the cultivation techniques they cultivated or the various spiritual items provided by the Yun nation's imperial family, they were definitely the best supplies. In the eyes of the demonic beasts in the Hengduan Mountains, they were definitely the best of the best. They had not been attacked until now only because the demonic beasts had not gathered enough strength to eliminate them. Chapter 1041. However, Lin Yuan had already seen it. There were already some greedy demonic beasts eyeing the gathering place of the Yun nation's tiger soldiers. Lin Yuan didn't doubt the professionalism of the Yun nation's tiger soldiers. Whether it was the selection of a hidden gathering place, the timing of the attack, or even the psychological suppression of the northern frontier troops, they were all very experienced. If Lin Yuan hadn't spoken, they could have even gotten rid of Li Zhongxing, the commander of the army, in advance before the war officially started. However, this army, Lin Yuan directly pronounced a death sentence. Veterans and generals were the precious wealth of an army. The more famous the army, the more it needed an unparalleled general to lead it. The Wei Wu army, which was similar to the Yun nation's tiger soldiers, had completely declined after losing a large number of veterans due to a series of strategic mistakes made by the Wei nation. The source of soldiers and equipment were indeed important factors in forming a strong army. However, there was an old saying in Lin Yuan's previous life that said, "Having an old man at home is like having a treasure." This saying was also applicable in the army. Perhaps after reaching a certain age, the veterans would no longer be as brave as the recruits. However, they had rich combat experience and knew when to make the right decision. When there were enough veterans, they didn't even need the general to give them orders. They would act on their own and bring about a glorious victory. Even if they lost the battle, there wouldn't be any major problems because the experienced veterans would always be able to lead the recruits and survive. However, the Yun nation's tiger soldiers didn't have a general with a keen sense of smell or experienced veterans. The reason why they could become the Chu Yun dynasty's trump card army was firstly because of the terrain advantage of the Chu Yun dynasty. Secondly, they rarely clashed head-on with other armies. Although the Chu Yun tiger soldiers had rich combat experience, they didn't have generals and veterans. They couldn't apply their combat experience flexibly. If they did things according to the book, it would lead to the current situation. Just like this? Waiting to attack the northern frontier troops at night? Once the sky darkened, most of the demonic beasts in the vicinity would definitely gather. By then, it would be hard to say who would be the prey. Even if the Yun nation's tiger soldiers were good at fighting in mountainous areas, there were still differences between different mountainous areas. The terrain of the Hengduan mountain range was complicated. How could they be more familiar with the terrain than the demonic beasts living in this area? It shouldn't be a problem to waste one night, right? Lin Yuan coiled his body together, squinted his eyes and said, "It's a pity that we can't take too big of a step. Otherwise, we can break the legs of the Yun dynasty in this battle and turn around to teach the Yun dynasty and the southern wasteland demon venerable a lesson." At the other side, When the mighty Frost Mirror Barbarian appeared in the line of sight of the northern frontier's Great Wall sentry towers, clusters of beacons lit up. The soldiers stationed at the various points of the northern frontier perked up, especially the bald man guarding the first checkpoint. He directly raised his hand to touch his egg-like head and cursed, "Damn it, they came so quickly. What bad luck." He had previously boasted to Li Zhongxing. Although he had a certain level of confidence, the tone was also based on the premise that he could at least hold on for half a month and wait for the Blackwater army to arrive. Only then would he be able to defend the first checkpoint of the northern frontier's Great Wall. He couldn't possibly give up on this place if he couldn't even hold on for half a month and distribute the pressure to the cities behind that formed the northern frontier's Great Wall, right? That would be too humiliating. Rumble. Rumble. A thunderous sound rang behind him. The bald man turned his head with a face full of doubt. He saw tens of thousands of cavalrymen galloping over. As the saying goes, if there were more than 10,000 people, there would be no end to it. With just a glance, he could barely judge that the number of cavalrymen was probably no less than 30,000. However, the specific number was not something that could be estimated casually. Standing on the checkpoint, the bald man narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a clear voice, "Stop 1 arrow's distance away, report your name." The leading cavalryman threw out a pitch-black token with his right hand. The token flew through the wind like a black arrow, brushing past the bald man's cheek and nailing into the center of an arrow target behind him. The bald man touched his burning cheeks. When he turned his head to look at the black token, his pupils suddenly shrank. There were 5 words written on it in simplified Chinese. Northern Frontier's Dragon Rider. Xiao. He had never heard of the Northern Frontier's Dragon Riders, nor did he know that there was anyone with authority in the northern frontier with the surname Xiao. However, the simplified Chinese from Lin Yuan's previous world was completely different from Heaven Martial World's common language. Only the upper echelons of the northern frontier knew how to use simplified Chinese. Even if the secret documents of the northern frontier were leaked out, the other powers wouldn't be able to understand this language at all. They couldn't find Li Zhong or Li Xian, these types of upper echelons of the northern frontier, to act as translators for them, right? Otherwise, would they find someone like Li Zhongxing who led an army by himself? Even if it was him, it was only because he was entrusted with an important task by Li Zhongxing that he was able to learn the simplified Chinese dictionary. Wasn't that just wishful thinking? Switch. The officer surnamed Zhao's words were concise and comprehensive, as if he didn't have any intention of communicating with the bald man. But outside the pass, the bald man opened his mouth, but before he could finish speaking, his pupils abruptly contracted. His sharp battle sense made him realize that something wasn't right. Of course, he wasn't suspecting the officer surnamed Xiao. After all, there weren't many people who knew about the existence of simplified Chinese and had this type of command tablet. Among the upper echelons of the northern frontier, he knew that only Li Zhongxing, this type of commander who led an army by himself, had one. And Li Zhong seemed to call this command tablet Tiger Tally? Right, it was the Tiger Tally. It was unknown when the Northern Frontier Army had an additional rule, and that was that they only recognized the Tiger Tally and not the person. In other words, right now, apart from the Dragon King, all of the commanders in the Northern Frontier, who led an army by themselves, couldn't mobilize the soldiers under their command without the Tiger Tally. He only suddenly realized that this battle at the Northern Frontier's Great Wall might not be as simple as a simple defensive battle. When did the Northern Frontier train a cavalry unit? Why didn't this cavalry unit show up in the battle against the Sky Demon? Why did they choose to quietly appear at the Northern Frontier's Great Wall at this time? Switch. The bald man's mind raced as he turned his head and shouted at the messenger not far away. Marquis, but... The messenger hesitated for a moment. After all, the Frost Mirror Barbarians' warhorses were famous for their speed. Even though they had only appeared in the line of sight of the sentry tower, once the gate of the pass was opened, these Frost Mirror Barbarian horses would suddenly accelerate and directly charge into the pass. At that time, it wouldn't be so easy to close the gate. Chapter 1042. Open! The bald man roared and repeated his words. The northern frontier was always a place full of miracles. Back then, the 13th prince of the Shuangjin dynasty was killed by the Blackwater army with less than 10,000 men. Now, this unknown northern frontier dragon cavalry was going to challenge the Frost Mirror Grasslands army of hundreds of thousands with only 30,000 men. It was simply crazy. However, how could the northern frontier only produce miracles once or twice? Which northern frontier citizen didn't believe that the Dragon King could create miracles time and time again? The gates on both sides of the pass slowly opened. The officer surnamed Xiao reached out and adjusted his helmet. He said with a deep voice, "The Dragon King ordered us to come here and teach you barbarians of the grassland what a cavalry is. Surrender your lives. Northern Frontier Dragon Cavalry. Put on your armor and raise your spears. Set out. Spears in hand. Follow me. Kill the barbarian dogs, set the grassland." The cavalry behind the officer surnamed Xiao raised the thick spears in their hands one after another. They roared and charged forward. They charged out of the pass that wasn't that wide. They didn't feel the slightest bit of weakness. The 30,000 men directly crashed into the hundreds of thousands of Frost Mirror barbarian soldiers. That kind of feeling didn't feel like they were fighting with fewer men. It was more like the 30,000 of them had surrounded the old Khan of the Shuangjian dynasty. "Marquis, we." The messenger trotted to the bald man's side. He looked like he wanted to say something, but he stopped himself. The bald man remained silent. He knew what his subordinate wanted to say. Even if these 30,000 cavalrymen were aggressive, the disparity in numbers was too great. This was especially true in a cavalry battle. If they were light cavalry or archers, it would be fine as long as they roamed near the enemy's main force and continuously launched effective attacks. They would be able to reap the rewards. However, the problem was that these northern frontier dragon cavalry. The bald man had lived for more than 40 years, but he had never seen this kind of cavalry. Their entire bodies were wrapped in pitch-black heavy armor. Even their helmets were covered helmets. There was a sharp protrusion at the bridge of their noses that looked like a small spearhead. Even though he didn't recognize the metal used to make these helmets, he could tell that the sharp protrusion could really be used as a weapon. If someone wearing these helmets used a headbutt, they might be able to directly pierce through the enemy's head. The eye part of the helmet that protruded upwards was a horizontal piece of steel. There were vertical holes that were chiseled into it. Even though it would affect a portion of their vision, there wouldn't be any problems if they were only charging. From another perspective, this helmet design. It had to be understood that the Frost Mirror barbarian were most proficient in horseback riding, but there was nothing they could do about this helmet that was unless they were needles instead of arrows. Of the Frost Mirror of barbarian soldiers. Otherwise, they definitely wouldn't be able to penetrate those vertical holes and injure the knights on horseback. Apart from the armor that had full defensive strength, their mounts were even more ridiculous. They were wrapped even more tightly than the knights on horseback. The hanging chain armor perfectly protected their legs without affecting their running. Their eyes were also covered. They were completely controlled by the knights on horseback. What was even more ridiculous was that not a single one of these mounts were normal beasts. There weren't even any hybrid beasts. They were all different types of demonic beasts. Tigers and leopards weren't rare. Of course, there were even more demonic beasts that looked like horses. Even without mentioning the armor on the outside, just the fact that all of the mounts were demonic beasts was already something that the Frost Mirror warhorses that only had the bloodline of demonic beasts couldn't compare to. Therefore, from the beginning of the establishment of this cavalry, there was only one purpose: to charge forward until they died. With such heavy equipment, the requirements for both the knights and the demonic beasts were not low. It was fine for them to charge forward, but it was simply impossible for them to be as agile as light cavalry on the battlefield. It wasn't that they couldn't turn, but the speed would be very slow. Once they increased their speed, they might lose their center of gravity and fall. It was hard to say what would happen to the demonic beasts, but the weight of the demonic beasts and the armor would probably crush one of the knight's legs in an instant. It wasn't that the Shuangjian dynasty didn't have heavy cavalry, but whose heavy cavalry was this ridiculous? If the transmigrators from Lin Yuan's previous life saw this scene, they would probably complain, "That's not a heavy cavalry. They might as well be tanks." Let's see how the battle goes first. The bald man thought about it for a moment, but in the end, he still clenched his teeth and said this. He didn't know how strong the Northern Frontier's dragon cavalry were, but this type of action of directly closing the gate as soon as they came out of seclusion was definitely not a problem from a strategic point of view. After all, it was the Northern Frontier's dragon cavalry that came out of seclusion to seek battle, not him. Moreover, they had their own mission, so no matter how he thought about it, they shouldn't choose to give up on the advantage of the past just because of their allies' frivolity, right? However, Closing the gate at this type of time was simply not giving these allies any chance to back out. It was no different from stabbing them in the back. In all fairness, there wasn't a single soldier with a bottom line that was willing to do this type of thing. Meanwhile, at the same time, the old man named Tuachuo Buhua Shuangjian was even more furious. He admitted that the northern frontier was an extremely strange place, so when the officer surnamed Xiao didn't suppress his voice and instead used his astral energy to amplify it, he was truly given a fright. He thought that the northern frontier had long prepared a large army to ambush him, but when he looked carefully, he saw that there were only several tens of thousands of strangely dressed cavalry that came out of the pass. From the expressions of the soldiers guarding the pass, it seemed like they were going to close the gate at any moment. Damn, these cavalry that didn't even trust their own people threatened to take his life, and even told him what cavalry was. Wasn't this just too ridiculous? He was Tuachuo Buhua, the great chief of the Bloodstream tribe, the conqueror and protector of the Frost Mirror Plains. Even if it was Yan Xingqi. Regardless of whether or not Yan Xingqi was stabbed in the back by Lei Qiuxing, he still used an army of slaves and criminals to stop Yan Xingqi. Using the evaluations of the other imperial dynasties, he was definitely in existence on the level of a famous general. Wolf pups, these two-legged sheep of the northern frontier are looking down on us, the warriors of the grassland. The old Khan growled with a gloomy look in his eyes. Who will fight for me and kill these strange cavalry? I will let him be the first one to charge into Shunning City and loot the wealth. Hurrah! A chief of the Frost Mirror tribe who was wearing a wolf fur cloak, rode out and said, "The 80,000 men of the Pleasure Escape tribe are willing to share the burden of the Great Khan." Agreed. The old Khan's eyes were cold and gloomy as he said with a cold voice, "Tuachuo, remember, you must win this battle. If you return in defeat, I will remove the name of your Pleasure Escape tribe from the Frost Mirror Plains." Ha ha ha. Don't worry, Great Khan. They are just a bunch of pups who don't even know how to ride a horse. Tuachuo laughed and rode out of the army while roaring, "Men of the Pleasure Escape tribe, follow me into battle." You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.